The day the video appeared online, no one could have predicted how far it would travel, or how deeply it would shake a community already weary from too many stories like this. It started simply enough. A clip, less than 2 minutes long, showing a police officer aggressively confronting an unarmed woman. But the rawness of the scene, the woman's calm resistance against overwhelming force, and the unmistakable tension of racial undertones made it impossible to look away. Within hours, the video was shared thousands of times. Social media feeds flooded with shocked reactions, anger, and demands for justice. The officer, whose badge and uniform symbolized protection, was now seen by millions as the face of something far more troubling, a painful reminder of systemic issues many believed were long overdue for reckoning. But behind the viral sensation was a real woman with a story that was about to be overshadowed by headlines, hashtags, and hashtags turned rallying cries. Her name was Maya Thompson, a quiet figure in her neighborhood, a mother and a worker just trying to live her life without incident. Until that day. The video showed Maya walking down a familiar city street, her hands empty, her pace unhurried. Then came the officer, his approach sudden and forceful, shouting orders that seemed unnecessary and escalating tensions within seconds. What followed was a brutal physical assault, captured unflinchingly by a bystander's phone. No warnings, no calls for calm, just immediate, overwhelming force against a woman who posed no visible threat. The crowd gathered, some filming, others shouting, some frozen in disbelief. The chaos was palpable. What made this video different from countless others was the clarity of the injustice. There was no confusion about what happened. It was clear, and it was infuriating. But it wasn't just a story of assault. It was a story about power, race, and a community's refusal to stay silent. Because when Maya's video went viral, it sparked something much larger than an individual case. It ignited a movement. Suddenly, the quiet neighborhood where Maya lived found itself at the center of national conversations about policing, accountability, and racial bias. Local activists organized rallies, community leaders demanded answers, and political figures took notice. The video forced a public reckoning no one could ignore. Yet amidst the growing storm, the most important voices, Maya's voice and the voices of those who knew her, risked being drowned out by noise. Her story, her truth, needed to be told fully. Not just the viral clip, but the woman behind it. Her life before the incident, the impact of that moment on her future, and the journey toward justice that would change everything. This is that story. A story of a woman who faced brutality without weapons, only courage. A story of a system challenged by a video that refused to be unseen. And a story of a community and a nation forced to look in the mirror. What follows is not just an account of what happened on that fateful day, but a deep dive into the ripples it created, from the courtroom battles to the streets filled with protest, from personal trauma to public activism. We'll meet Maya, hear from those who know her, and understand the forces that shaped this moment. Because this isn't just about one cop or one woman. It's about how a simple video changed lives and opened the door to a conversation long overdue. Before we go any further, take a moment to reflect. Imagine being in Maya's shoes, walking down your street, feeling safe, only to be confronted and assaulted by someone sworn to protect you. The shock, the fear, the disbelief. How would you react? What would you hope for? This video, this incident, is a harsh reminder of realities too many live with every day. But it also reminds us that even a single moment captured on a screen can expose truths that demand change. So where did this all begin? How did Maya's life intertwine with that of an officer who made a choice that would alter both their lives forever? And how did a few minutes of footage become a case that took on the courts, the media, and the nation? In the coming parts, we'll explore these questions step by step. But for now, hold on to this image. The video that went viral, the woman who stood her ground, and the spark that ignited a fight for justice. Because this story is just getting started. As the legal battle against Officer Daniel Mercer unfolded in the public eye, the toll it took on Maya Thompson was immense. What started as a personal trauma became a prolonged, exhausting journey filled with emotional upheaval, media attention, and the weight of representing an entire community's hope for justice. Maya's days became consumed by court dates, legal consultations, and interviews. The emotional roller coaster was relentless. Some mornings she woke feeling determined and strong, others overwhelmed and vulnerable. The trauma of the assault was compounded by the pressures of public scrutiny and the adversarial nature of the courtroom. Family members became her anchor. Her mother, a pillar of strength, reminded Maya daily of her worth and the importance of standing tall. "You are not alone," she would say, offering comfort through tears and hugs. Maya's son, too young to fully grasp the situation, sensed the tension at home and tried in his own way to bring moments of joy amidst the chaos. Friends and community members rallied around Maya, offering emotional support and practical help. Many volunteered to accompany her to court or sit with her during long waits. Local churches and organizations provided counseling services, understanding that the trauma extended far beyond the courtroom walls. Yet the emotional strain was not limited to Maya alone. The community that had risen up in her defense also felt the weight of the case. For many, the trial was a reminder of wounds that never fully healed, a stark illustration of ongoing injustices. Activists worked tirelessly to maintain momentum, aware that progress depended on both legal outcomes and sustained public pressure. The emotional cost was visible during protests and rallies. Tears were shed for Maya, for those who came before her, and for those who might face similar fates. Yet, amid sorrow, there was a fierce determination to keep pushing forward. Songs of hope echoed in city squares. Speeches inspired courage. Artworks and murals commemorated resilience. Maya's story became intertwined with a broader narrative of community strength. She was not just a victim, she was a symbol of resistance and hope. Her willingness to share her experience publicly encouraged others to speak out, fostering a culture of openness and solidarity. At times, however, the attention was intrusive and unwelcome. Media crews camped near Maya's home. Strangers approached her in public, sometimes with kindness, sometimes with hostility. Social media messages ranged from supportive to threatening. Maya's privacy was shattered, and maintaining normalcy became a daily struggle. Her attorneys worked to shield her from the worst excesses of the spotlight, requesting restraining orders when necessary and managing public statements carefully. The balance between transparency and protection was delicate and ongoing. Mental health professionals emphasized the importance of self-care and therapy. Maya engaged in counseling to process her trauma, learning coping strategies to manage anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress. Community programs organized support groups for victims of police violence, creating safe spaces for healing. Throughout, Maya found strength in small moments. A smile from her son, a letter from a supporter, a quiet evening spent with close friends. These were the sparks that sustained her through the darkest days. The trial's emotional toll extended to her family as well. Her mother grappled with worry for her daughter's safety and well-being. Friends struggled to reconcile their love for Maya with the painful realities of the justice system. The community, while united, faced internal conflicts and exhaustion. Nevertheless, the shared struggle forged bonds of resilience. Neighborhoods organized to protect one another. Faith leaders called for peace and reconciliation. Activists strategized for long-term change, understanding that true justice required systemic transformation. Maya's courage inspired many, but it also highlighted the profound human cost of standing up against entrenched systems. Her story was a reminder that behind every headline was a person fighting to reclaim their dignity and future. As the trial reached its climax, Maya prepared herself for the outcome, knowing that whatever happened in the courtroom, the fight for justice and healing would continue. In the next part, we will examine the courtroom's dramatic conclusion, the verdict, reactions, and what it meant for Maya, Officer Mercer, and the community at large. After weeks of emotional testimony, intense legal arguments, and unyielding public attention, the courtroom finally prepared to hear the verdict in the case against Officer Daniel Mercer. The air was thick with anticipation as the jurors retired to deliberate, a moment pregnant with significance not just for Maya Thompson and Mercer, but for the entire community watching closely. The trial had become more than a contest between two parties. It was a referendum on police accountability and racial justice. Public sentiment was divided, but many hoped the verdict would affirm that no one, not even an officer in uniform, was above the law. Days later, the jurors returned. The judge called the courtroom to order and asked the foreperson to read the decision. Silence fell. The jury found Officer Mercer guilty of excessive use of force and assault, but acquitted him of the civil rights violation charge. The verdict was met with mixed reactions. For Maya and her supporters, it was a moment of hard-won justice, a validation of their pain and persistence. Relief and tears mingled as Maya clutched her mother's hand, the weight of months of struggle. Lifting, if only slightly, community leaders celebrated the conviction as a landmark step toward police accountability. Today, justice prevailed, proclaimed a local activist during a press conference. This verdict sends a message: abuse of power will not be tolerated. However, the acquittal on the civil rights charge and the judge's decision to sentence Mercer to a relatively lenient term left many feeling that the justice was incomplete. Critics argued that the consequences did not fully reflect the gravity of Mercer's actions or the systemic problems they symbolized. The police department released a statement expressing disappointment in the verdict, but respecting the judicial process. Officer Mercer was suspended without pay pending sentencing. The department reiterated its commitment to ongoing reforms. Mercer's legal team vowed to appeal, framing the verdict as a compromise and maintaining their client's innocence. Regarding the civil rights accusations, public debates reignited about the fairness of the justice system in cases involving law enforcement. For Maya, the verdict was bittersweet. It affirmed her truth, but underscored the long road still ahead, not just for herself, but for many others. She continued advocating for police reforms and support for victims, determined to turn her experience into lasting change. The community's response was a mixture of celebration and resolve. Vigils were held to honor the courage it took to bring the case forward. Forums discussed ways to build on the momentum toward justice. At the same time, activists warned against complacency, reminding everyone that one verdict did not end the fight against systemic racism. Maya returned to her life with renewed purpose. She worked with advocacy groups to promote legislation aimed at increasing police transparency and accountability. She spoke at events, sharing her story and urging communities to remain vigilant and united. The media coverage shifted from courtroom drama to broader discussions about policing policies, racial bias, and the importance of community engagement. Maya's name became synonymous with resilience and the power of standing up to injustice. As Officer Mercer awaited sentencing and prepared for possible appeals, his case became a focal point for ongoing national conversations about race, law, enforcement, and justice. The incident, trial, and verdict were studied by scholars, activists, and policymakers seeking ways to prevent similar tragedies. For the city where it all began, the verdict marked both an end and a beginning, a reckoning with the past and a call to build a better future. In the next part, we will explore the legislative and policy changes inspired by Maya's case, the reforms introduced, the challenges faced, and the ongoing quest for systemic transformation. The verdict in the trial of Officer Daniel Mercer was not only a pivotal moment in the pursuit of justice for Maya Thompson, but also served as a catalyst for legislative and policy changes that aimed to address the systemic issues that led to the incident. Across the city and beyond, lawmakers, activists, and community members mobilized to transform the tragedy into a turning point for policing reform. In the weeks following the verdict, City Council members convened a special session to discuss the implications of the case and the urgent need for comprehensive changes in law enforcement practices. Maya's story had laid bare not just an individual's misconduct, but the structural failures allowing such abuses to occur with impunity. One of the first reforms introduced was the implementation of mandatory body cameras for all officers during interactions with the public. Advocates argued that such devices were crucial for transparency and accountability. The policy included strict guidelines on the activation and storage of footage to prevent tampering and ensure accessibility for investigations. Additionally, the Council passed legislation establishing an independent civilian oversight board, with the authority to review complaints against police officers, conduct investigations, and recommend disciplinary actions. This was a direct response to criticisms of internal police investigations, which were often perceived as biased or ineffective. Training protocols were also overhauled. The city mandated enhanced de-escalation and implicit bias training for all officers, emphasizing communication skills, cultural competency, and techniques to reduce the use of force. These training sessions were designed in collaboration with community organizations and experts in racial justice. A significant policy shift involved revising use-of-force guidelines to prioritize the preservation of life and minimize physical confrontations. Officers were required to exhaust all other reasonable options before resorting to force, with clear reporting requirements for every incident involving physical intervention. Funding was allocated to community policing initiatives that fostered stronger relationships between law enforcement and residents. These programs included neighborhood liaison officers, community advisory councils, and regular town hall meetings to build trust and encourage dialogue. The legislative changes were met with both praise and skepticism. Supporters hailed the reforms as necessary steps toward healing and accountability. They emphasized that Maya's case had illuminated long-standing problems that required bold solutions. However, some law enforcement groups expressed concerns that the reforms could hinder officers' ability to perform their duties effectively. They warned of increased bureaucracy and the risk of undermining morale. Dialogue between police representatives and reform advocates was crucial in navigating these tensions. State lawmakers took note as well. Inspired by the city's actions and national attention on police reform, several states introduced bills to strengthen oversight mechanisms, improve training standards, and enhance transparency in policing statewide. Maya became an outspoken advocate for these reforms. She testified before legislative committees, sharing her personal experiences and emphasizing the human impact behind policy decisions. Her voice helped personalize the abstract debates, reminding lawmakers that behind every statistic was a person whose life had been altered by police misconduct. Her advocacy extended beyond legislation. Maya worked with non-profit organizations to develop educational programs aimed at empowering youth with knowledge about their rights and encouraging civic engagement. She believed that community empowerment was a key component in preventing future abuses. The reforms also sparked renewed interest in addressing broader systemic issues, such as economic inequality, housing instability, and access to education, factors that often intersected with policing in marginalized communities. Activists pushed for holistic approaches, recognizing that police reform alone could not resolve entrenched social problems. Media coverage highlighted the progress, but also the challenges ahead. Analysts noted that implementation and enforcement of new policies would be critical to their success. Without genuine commitment from law enforcement agencies and ongoing community involvement, reforms risked becoming symbolic gestures. The city established oversight committees to monitor the rollout of new policies, solicit community feedback, and adjust strategies as needed. Regular reports on police conduct, use of force incidents, and complaint resolutions were made publicly available to enhance transparency. Despite the advances, activists remained vigilant. They understood that lasting change required persistent effort, and Maya's case was a reminder of what was at stake. Community organizations continued to organize educational campaigns, legal aid services, and support networks for victims of police violence. The reforms inspired by Maya Thompson's story marked a hopeful chapter in the ongoing struggle for justice. They demonstrated that grassroots activism, combined with political will, could influence policy and create safer, more equitable communities. In the next part, we will delve into the lasting impact of Maya's case, the cultural conversations it sparked, the shifts in public consciousness, and the enduring legacy of her fight for justice. Maya Thompson's case, propelled into the national spotlight by a viral video and the ensuing legal battle, transcended the courtroom and the political arena, igniting profound cultural conversations across the country. The story's resonance revealed society's urgent need to grapple with uncomfortable truths about race, policing, and justice, prompting shifts in public consciousness that would shape discourse for years to come. At its core, Maya's experience spotlighted the pervasive issue of police violence against black women, a topic often marginalized in broader conversations about law enforcement and racial injustice. Historically, media and activism have frequently focused on violence against black men, leaving the specific vulnerabilities of black women overlooked. Maya's case challenged this narrative, compelling society to confront the intersection of race and gender in policing. Community forums, academic panels, and media discussions explored how systemic racism and sexism intersect to produce unique challenges for black women in encounters with law enforcement. Scholars highlighted the dual invisibility faced by black women, who are often underrepresented in policy reforms and public awareness campaigns. Art and culture became vehicles for expressing these complex realities. Musicians, poets, filmmakers, and visual artists created works inspired by Maya's story and the broader movement it energized. Street murals appeared in cities nationwide, depicting Maya as a symbol of resilience and the fight for justice. These creative expressions humanized the struggle, fostering empathy and raising awareness beyond traditional advocacy spaces. Social media played a pivotal role in shaping public conversations. Hashtags centered on Maya's case trended alongside calls for police reform and racial justice. Influencers and activists leveraged platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok to educate younger audiences about the case's significance and the systemic issues it unveiled. The dialogues extended into educational institutions. Schools and universities incorporated discussions of Maya's case into curricula on social justice, law, and ethics. Students engaged in debates and projects examining the intersections of race, gender, and policing, fostering critical thinking and activism among the next generation. Public opinion polls reflected shifting attitudes. Surveys indicated increased awareness of police violence against women of color and growing support for reforms to address systemic bias. However, the data also revealed persistent divisions along racial and political lines, underscoring the complexity of achieving consensus on these issues. Media outlets diversified their coverage, featuring voices from communities historically underrepresented in journalism. Black women's perspectives gained prominence, challenging stereotypes and broadening the narrative scope. Opinion pieces, interviews, and documentaries provided nuanced insights into the lived experiences behind headlines. Corporate America responded as well. Companies issued statements endorsing racial justice and pledged resources to support reform efforts and community initiatives. Some faced scrutiny over performative allyship, prompting deeper conversations about authentic engagement with social justice causes. The entertainment industry began to reflect these cultural shifts. Television shows, films, and documentaries increasingly portrayed stories of Black women confronting systemic injustice, drawing inspiration from real-life events like Maya's. This representation contributed to greater visibility and understanding. However, these cultural conversations were not without backlash. Critics accused activists and media of fostering division and undermining law enforcement. Debates over law and order versus social justice intensified, highlighting enduring ideological divides in American society. Despite resistance, the cultural impact of Maya's case was undeniable. It catalyzed a re-examination of societal values, compelling individuals and institutions to confront implicit biases and systemic inequities. The story fostered solidarity among diverse communities, emphasizing shared humanity and the pursuit of justice. Maya herself became a reluctant but powerful symbol within this cultural landscape. She used her platform to advocate for intersectional justice, emphasizing that true equity required addressing multiple dimensions of identity and oppression. Her voice inspired others to share their stories and engage in activism. The lasting legacy of Maya's case lay in its ability to transform personal tragedy into collective awakening. It sparked dialogues that transcended geography, race, and class, inviting a nation to reckon with its past and envision a more just future. In the next part, we will examine Maya's ongoing journey, the personal growth, continued advocacy, and the enduring impact of her courage on her life and the broader movement. Maya Thompson's life after the trial did not return to what many would consider normal. Instead, she embarked on an ongoing journey of personal growth and relentless advocacy, transforming her experience into a powerful platform to inspire change far beyond her own story. While the court verdict marked a milestone, Maya understood that her fight for justice and systemic reform was only beginning. In the aftermath of the trial, Maya took time to focus inward, confronting the emotional and psychological scars left by the assault and the intense public scrutiny. Therapy and counseling became essential tools in her healing process. She openly discussed the importance of mental health support for survivors of police violence, emphasizing that recovery was complex and multifaceted. Maya's willingness to speak candidly about her trauma helped destigmatize mental health struggles within her community. She encouraged others to seek help, highlighting that healing was not a sign of weakness, but a vital step toward reclaiming power and dignity. Alongside personal healing, Maya committed herself to sustained activism. She collaborated with local and national organizations dedicated to criminal justice reform, women's rights, and racial equity. Her voice brought unique insight into the intersectional nature of police violence, advocating for policies that recognize the specific vulnerabilities of Black women. Her advocacy took many forms: speaking engagements at universities, conferences, and community forums, participation in legislative hearings, and involvement in educational campaigns aimed at raising awareness about civil rights and police accountability. Maya's message consistently emphasized empowerment, resilience, and the necessity of systemic change. Maya also worked to establish support networks for survivors of police violence. She helped launch peer mentorship programs, connecting individuals who had experienced similar trauma with counselors, legal resources, and community advocates. These programs fostered healing and solidarity, creating spaces where survivors could share their stories and find strength together. Balancing her public role with private life was a continual challenge. Maya remained devoted to her family, especially her young son, striving to provide stability and love amid the ongoing demands of advocacy. She often spoke about the importance of family support and self-care in sustaining long-term activism. Education became a cornerstone of Maya's efforts. She collaborated with schools to develop curricula on civil rights, social justice, and community engagement, aiming to equip young people with the knowledge and tools to become informed citizens and change-makers. Maya believed that educating youth was essential to breaking cycles of injustice. Her story inspired a new generation of activists, many of whom saw in Maya a model of courage and perseverance. She mentored young leaders, encouraging them to pursue justice through diverse paths, whether through law, policy, art, or grassroots organizing. Maya's journey also brought her into dialogue with law enforcement and policymakers. While maintaining a critical stance, she sought to build bridges where possible, advocating for constructive conversations that could lead to meaningful reforms. She recognized the complexity of change, emphasizing that transforming institutions required collaboration alongside accountability. Media continued to follow Maya's evolving role. Documentaries and profiles explored her story in depth, highlighting both the challenges and triumphs of her journey. Maya used these platforms to amplify messages of hope, justice, and the power of community action. Despite her public prominence, Maya remained grounded. She frequently expressed that her advocacy was rooted in the desire to ensure that no one else would endure what she had experienced. Her mission was not just personal, but deeply communal, centered on building safer, more equitable societies. Her work influenced policy developments and inspired cultural shifts, yet Maya remained aware of the ongoing nature of the struggle. She spoke openly about the need for vigilance, reminding supporters that progress could be fragile and required continued effort. In her private moments, Maya found solace in simple joys: a walk with her son, time spent with friends, quiet reflection. These moments replenished her spirit, enabling her to sustain the demanding pace of advocacy. Maya Thompson's ongoing journey illustrated the profound transformation that can arise from adversity. Her story was one of resilience, courage, and an unwavering commitment to justice that continued to ripple through her community and beyond. In the next part, we will explore the broader national and global impact of Maya's case, how it resonated internationally and influenced movements for police reform worldwide. Maya Thompson's story, ignited by a single viral video and amplified by relentless advocacy, reverberated far beyond her local community. The impact of her fight against police violence and systemic injustice extended to national and global stages, sparking conversations, influencing movements, and inspiring reform efforts across continents. National resonance. Within the United States, Maya's case became emblematic of a broader reckoning with racial injustice and policing. Media coverage expanded from local news to national outlets, with interviews, documentaries, and opinion pieces dissecting the case's legal, social, and cultural significance. Her story was featured in major newspapers, on national television, and across digital platforms, introducing audiences nationwide to the realities faced by Black women in encounters with law enforcement. Civil rights organizations cited Maya's case as a rallying point in campaigns to address police misconduct. Her courage in coming forward encouraged countless others to share their own experiences, contributing to a groundswell of testimonies that deepened public understanding of systemic abuses. Maya was invited to participate in national forums, panels, and conferences, sharing her insights with policymakers, activists, and scholars. Her narrative helped shape policy debates and legislative initiatives aimed at reforming policing and promoting racial equity. Educational institutions incorporated Maya's story into curricula addressing social justice, law enforcement, and human rights, ensuring that future generations understood the complexities of racial and gendered violence. Global echoes internationally. Maya's case resonated with movements confronting police brutality and systemic racism in countries across Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Human rights organizations included her story in reports highlighting patterns of racialized violence by law enforcement worldwide. Social media facilitated transnational solidarity as activists used hashtags linked to Maya's case alongside global campaigns such as Black Lives Matter. Her experience illuminated shared struggles across borders, connecting communities fighting against oppression and for justice. In some countries, Maya's story inspired local advocacy efforts focused on police reform and racial equality. International conferences and summits addressing human rights featured her case as a case study in the challenges and possibilities of confronting systemic injustice. The global reach of her story underscored the universality of issues related to race, power, and accountability, fostering dialogues that transcended national contexts and encouraged cross-cultural learning and collaboration. Challenges and controversies. While Maya's case garnered widespread support, it also faced challenges inherent in navigating complex social and political landscapes. Some governments and institutions sought to downplay or dismiss the significance of such cases, fearing disruption or criticism of law enforcement practices. Debates about sovereignty, cultural differences, and the role of international pressure complicated efforts to apply lessons from Maya's experience globally. Nevertheless, the persistence of grassroots movements ensured that these conversations continued to advance. Cultural and artistic influence. Maya's story inspired artists worldwide who used their mediums to explore themes of justice, resilience, and systemic oppression. Music, literature, visual art, and theater pieces drew on her experience to provoke reflection and inspire activism. These cultural expressions amplified the emotional and human dimensions of her story, reaching audiences beyond traditional activist spaces and fostering empathy and understanding. Institutional responses. International human rights bodies and NGOs incorporated lessons from Maya's case into training materials, policy recommendations, and advocacy strategies. They emphasize the importance of centering marginalized voices and addressing intersectional forms of oppression in efforts to reform policing globally. Maya's experience became a powerful example of how individual stories can catalyze systemic change when supported by collective action and institutional commitment. Legacy and continuing influence. The national and global impact of Maya Thompson's story is a testament to the power of courage, visibility, and advocacy in confronting injustice. Her journey galvanized a generation of activists and policymakers, encouraging ongoing efforts to dismantle systemic racism and build more equitable societies. As the world continues to grapple with questions of justice and equality, Maya's story remains a beacon of hope and a call to action, reminding us that change begins when ordinary people dare to speak out and stand firm. In the next part, we will examine the personal narratives of other survivors who, inspired by Maya, found their own voices and contributed to the expanding movement for justice. Maya Thompson's courageous stand against police brutality not only brought attention to her own ordeal, but also ignited a powerful wave of resilience and activism among survivors nationwide. Her story inspired countless others to share their experiences, find solidarity, and demand change. This part explores the personal journeys of these survivors, their struggles, triumphs, and the collective power they wield in the fight for justice. A chorus of voices across cities and towns. Survivors of police violence began to come forward, encouraged by Maya's example. Their stories, once silenced by fear or stigma, found platforms in social media, community gatherings, and advocacy groups. These voices painted a broader picture of systemic abuses, revealing patterns of racial profiling, excessive force, and institutional neglect. From black women who faced harassment and assault during routine traffic stops, to men who survived wrongful arrests, each narrative added depth to the movement's understanding of policing's failings. Survivors spoke not just of individual incidents, but of the emotional and psychological scars carried long after physical wounds healed. Building community. Many survivors connected through grassroots organizations that offered support, legal aid, and spaces for healing. These communities provided emotional refuge and practical resources, fostering empowerment and resilience. Workshops and support groups taught survivors how to navigate legal systems, access mental health services, and engage in advocacy. Peer mentorship programs paired newcomers with experienced activists, creating networks of guidance and encouragement. Maya often participated in these gatherings, sharing her insights and lending support. Her presence was a source of inspiration and strength, demonstrating the transformative power of turning trauma into activism. Advocacy and policy influence survivors collectively amplified calls for systemic reform. Their testimonies before city councils, state legislatures, and congressional committees brought urgency and authenticity to policy debates. By sharing lived experiences, they challenged abstract discussions and grounded reform efforts in real human impacts. Coalitions formed across racial, ethnic, and socio-economic lines, recognizing that police violence and systemic injustice affected diverse communities. These alliances expanded the movement's reach and strengthened its demands. Survivors also influenced the design of community oversight boards and reform measures, advocating for survivor-centered approaches that prioritized transparency, accountability, and restorative justice, cultural expression, and storytelling. The movement of survivors inspired a rich cultural tapestry that conveyed their experiences through art, literature, music, and film. These creative expressions humanized their struggles, evoking empathy and raising awareness. Documentaries and podcasts featured survivor stories, highlighting personal journeys and community impacts. Artistic projects, such as murals and performances, celebrated resilience and called for societal change. These narratives helped shift public perceptions, challenging stereotypes and fostering broader understanding of the complexities surrounding police violence. Challenges and barriers despite growing visibility, survivors faced significant challenges. Many encountered re-traumatization through legal processes and media exposure. Fear of retaliation or social ostracism prevented some from speaking out. Access to resources such as legal representation, counseling, and financial support remained uneven. Activists worked to address these gaps, but systemic inequalities persisted. Moreover, survivors confronted societal skepticism and blame, underscoring the need for ongoing education and cultural change. Empowerment and healing central to survivors' journeys was the pursuit of healing and empowerment. Activism became a pathway to reclaim agency, transform pain into purpose, and rebuild lives. Community rituals, such as vigils and commemorations, honored those lost to police violence and celebrated survivors' strength. These acts fostered solidarity and collective resilience. Programs integrating trauma-informed care and advocacy equipped survivors with tools to navigate complex emotional landscapes while engaging in sustained activism. Legacy of Maya's inspiration. Maya's influence extended beyond her immediate circle, catalyzing a national movement of survivor-led activism. Her example demonstrated the power of individual courage to inspire collective action and systemic change. The growing network of survivors continues to shape dialogues around policing, justice, and equity, ensuring that reform efforts remain grounded in the voices of those most affected. In the next part, we will explore the evolving relationship between communities and law enforcement in the wake of these movements, examining efforts at rebuilding trust, challenges faced, and models of transformative engagement. The aftermath of Maya Thompson's case and the surge of survivor activism catalyzed a pivotal moment in the relationship between communities and law enforcement. Recognizing that justice extended beyond legal outcomes, city leaders, police departments, and community organizations embarked on efforts to rebuild trust, bridge divides, and foster genuine collaboration. This part delves into these transformative initiatives, the challenges encountered, and emerging models aiming to redefine policing for a more equitable future. Acknowledging the divide years of systemic mistrust and racialized policing had left many communities, particularly those of color, wary and fearful of law enforcement. Maya's case laid bare these fractures, highlighting the urgency of addressing the underlying causes rather than merely managing symptoms. Police leaders publicly Acknowledge the pain and anger in communities, issuing statements, recognizing past harms, and pledging commitment to change. These acknowledgements, though symbolic, were essential first steps in opening dialogues grounded in honesty and humility. Community members, while cautiously hopeful, remained vigilant, aware that words must be matched by sustained actions to heal long-standing wounds. Community policing initiatives, one of the foremost strategies adopted, was the expansion of community policing. This model emphasized proactive engagement, relationship building, and problem-solving in partnership with residents rather than reactive enforcement. Officers were assigned to specific neighborhoods to foster familiarity and accountability. Regular community meetings created forums for dialogue, feedback, and joint planning, allowing residents to voice concerns and collaborate on safety strategies. Programs such as neighborhood liaison officers and youth outreach aimed to humanize law enforcement personnel and provide positive interactions, especially for young people disproportionately affected by aggressive policing. These initiatives showed promise in reducing tensions and building mutual understanding, though their success depended heavily on consistent commitment and adequate resources. Restorative justice programs to address harm and repair relationships. Several jurisdictions introduced restorative justice programs as alternatives or complements to traditional criminal justice processes. These programs facilitated mediated dialogues between affected parties, promoting accountability, empathy, and healing. Participants could express the impact of harm, discuss needs, and collaboratively develop plans to make amends and prevent future conflict. Restorative justice offered a human-centered approach, emphasizing repair over punishment, aligning with community desires for justice that addressed root causes and fostered reconciliation. While not without challenges, including ensuring voluntary participation and managing power imbalances, these programs contributed to shifting narratives around justice. Training and culture. Change departments intensified efforts to transform organizational culture through comprehensive training, focusing on implicit bias, cultural competency, trauma-informed care, and de-escalation techniques. Training incorporated community voices and experiential learning to deepen officers' understanding of diverse lived realities. Leadership development emphasized ethical policing and accountability. Recruitment strategies evolved to attract candidates reflecting community demographics and values, aiming to diversify forces and improve cultural resonance. Despite progress, cultural change remained a complex, gradual process. Resistance from within and external skepticism highlighted the need for persistent effort and transparent evaluation. Technological innovations for accountability technology played an increasing role in enhancing transparency and accountability. Body-worn cameras became standard, with protocols ensuring proper usage and timely public access to footage. Data analytics helped identify patterns of misconduct or bias, enabling targeted interventions. Mobile apps and online platforms allowed residents to report incidents and provide feedback directly to oversight bodies. These tools empowered communities while equipping departments to monitor and improve practices systematically. Challenges and setbacks. Efforts to rebuild trust encountered obstacles, including entrenched skepticism, resource limitations, and occasional incidents undermining progress. Some communities questioned the sincerity of reform efforts, citing historical patterns of broken promises. Police unions sometimes opposed changes perceived as threatening officers' authority or job security. High-profile incidents of police violence during reform periods reignited tensions, underscoring the fragility of trust. Activists emphasized the importance of sustained engagement, transparency, and equitable resource allocation to prevent regression. Models of transformative engagement, innovative models emerged, combining multiple approaches for holistic transformation. Collaborative governance structures involving community members in policy development, oversight, and budgeting fostered shared ownership. Partnerships between law enforcement, social services, mental health providers, and community organizations created integrated responses addressing complex social issues beyond policing's traditional scope. Programs focusing on youth empowerment, economic development, and education complemented policing reforms, recognizing that community safety involves broader social determinants. Pilot projects experimenting with civilian-led crisis response teams and alternatives to arrest showed promise in reducing harm and building trust. Looking forward, rebuilding. Trust between communities and law enforcement remains a challenging but critical endeavor. The momentum generated by Maya Thompson's story and the broader movement provides a foundation for continued progress. Success depends on recognizing policing as one component of public safety, requiring cross-sector collaboration and sustained commitment to justice, equity, and healing. Communities and law enforcement agencies alike must engage in ongoing dialogue, reflection, and adaptation to navigate complexities and build relationships rooted in respect and accountability. Maya's legacy of courage and advocacy serves as a guiding light, reminding all stakeholders that meaningful change requires both confronting uncomfortable truths and envisioning a more just future together. In the next part, we will explore emerging alternatives to traditional policing, community-based safety initiatives, crisis intervention models, and transformative justice practices. Reshaping public safety. The movement galvanized by Maya Thompson's case, coupled with widespread calls for reform, sparked a broader re-examination of public safety beyond traditional policing. Activists, policymakers, and communities began exploring alternatives rooted in prevention, healing, and empowerment, aiming to address social harms without relying solely on law enforcement. This part delves into innovative models, reshaping public safety and fostering community well-being. Community-led safety initiatives. At the forefront of alternatives are community-led safety programs that prioritize local knowledge, relationships, and restorative approaches. These initiatives emphasize prevention over punishment, focusing on building resilience and addressing root causes of harm. Neighborhood safety councils and grassroots organizations engage residents in identifying priorities, designing responses, and mediating conflicts. These structures empower communities to reclaim control over their safety and foster mutual accountability. Programs often include training residents in conflict resolution, first aid, and crisis intervention, enabling neighbors to support one another effectively and reduce reliance on police responses. Crisis, intervention, and mental health response teams. One of the most significant innovations has been the development of crisis intervention teams that pair mental health professionals with trained responders to address behavioral health emergencies. These teams respond to incidents involving individuals experiencing mental health crises, substance use issues, or homelessness, situations traditionally managed by police but often ill-equipped to provide appropriate care. Such models, including CAHOOTS, Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets in Eugene, Oregon, have demonstrated success in diverting non-violent crises from law enforcement to specialized support, reducing arrests and injuries. Crisis teams provide de-escalation, connect individuals with services, and facilitate follow-up care, promoting humane and effective responses that prioritize healing and stability, restorative and transformative. Justice practices. Restorative justice focuses on repairing harm through facilitated dialogue among victims, offenders, and community members, emphasizing accountability, restitution, and reconciliation rather than punishment. Transformative justice expands this approach by addressing systemic conditions that perpetuate harm, seeking to transform social relations and institutions. To prevent violence, these practices create alternatives to incarceration and punitive policing, fostering community empowerment and long-term healing. Community circles, mediation, and peer support groups are common modalities, often integrated with social services to address complex needs holistically. Violence, interruption, and prevention. Programs' violence interruption initiatives deploy trained community members, often with lived experience, to mediate conflicts, de-escalate tensions, and prevent retaliatory violence. Programs like Cure Violence treat violence as a public health issue, using outreach, counseling, and resources to disrupt cycles of harm. By embedding trusted individuals within communities, these programs build bridges between residents and systems, providing alternatives to police intervention and fostering safer environments. Evaluation studies indicate reductions in shootings and violence in areas with active interruption programs, highlighting their effectiveness as community-centered strategies. Public health and social service integration, recognizing that many safety issues stem from social determinants. Poverty, housing insecurity, addiction. Integrated models bring together public health, social services, and law enforcement to address underlying factors. Mobile crisis units, housing first programs, and harm reduction strategies exemplify approaches that prioritize support over criminalization. Collaborative frameworks coordinate responses across agencies, enhancing resource efficiency and client outcomes. Challenges to implementation. Despite promising outcomes, these alternatives face obstacles. Funding constraints limit scalability, while entrenched institutional resistance slows adoption. Public skepticism about non-police responses requires education and demonstration of effectiveness. Legal and policy frameworks often lack provisions for formalizing alternative response teams, complicating integration with emergency services, ensuring equity and avoiding unintended consequences remain critical concerns in design and deployment. The role of policy and advocacy, sustained advocacy, has been vital in advancing alternative models. Activists press lawmakers to reallocate funding from traditional policing to community-based services and support legislative reforms enabling innovation. Policy reforms at local, state, and federal levels increasingly recognize and incentivize alternative responses. Reflecting shifting public priorities, community voices continue to shape policy agendas, emphasizing participatory decision-making and culturally competent services. Looking forward, the reimagining of public safety reflects a fundamental shift toward justice, equity, and community empowerment. Maya Thompson's story and the movement it fueled demonstrate that transformative change is possible when alternatives prioritize humanity over enforcement. Scaling and sustaining these models require continued investment, collaboration, and learning. By centering lived experience and community wisdom, society can build safer, healthier, and more just environments for all. In the next part, we will examine the ongoing challenges faced by activists and communities, legal obstacles, political pushback, and the strategies used to navigate resistance and sustain momentum. The powerful movement ignited by Maya Thompson's case, while inspiring widespread calls for justice and reform, inevitably encountered resistance on multiple fronts. Activists, communities, and reform advocates faced legal obstacles, political pushback, and societal skepticism that complicated their efforts. This part explores the nature of these challenges and the strategies deployed to overcome them, ensuring the movement's resilience and continued progress. Legal obstacles. Legal systems often posed barriers to holding law enforcement accountable. Qualified immunity protections, a doctrine shielding officers from civil liability unless they violated clearly established rights, limited survivors' access to justice. Reform advocates fought to narrow or abolish qualified immunity, arguing it enabled impunity for misconduct. Some states passed legislation to that effect, but changes at the federal level remained elusive amid political gridlock. Civil lawsuits required extensive resources and endured protracted timelines, straining survivors' financial and emotional capacities. Activists established legal defense funds and pro bono networks to support plaintiffs, recognizing the need for accessible legal pathways. Criminal prosecutions of officers for misconduct were rare and difficult due to institutional biases, evidentiary challenges, and prosecutorial reluctance. Community pressure and media scrutiny played vital roles in prompting investigations and charges in high-profile cases. Political pushback. Political actors sometimes resisted reform efforts, influenced by law enforcement unions, ideological divides, or fears of undermining public safety. Some politicians framed calls for reform as anti-police or lawless, rallying constituencies opposed to changes. This rhetoric polarized public discourse, complicating consensus-building. Efforts to reallocate funding from police budgets to social services, so-called defund the police campaigns, met with backlash and misinformation. Despite broad public support for reinvestment in community-based safety, advocates employed data-driven messaging, coalition building, and community engagement to counter misinformation and build political will. Electoral strategies supported candidates committed to justice reforms. Societal skepticism and media narratives, public attitudes were mixed, with some segments skeptical of activist demands or unaware of systemic issues. Misleading media coverage sometimes sensationalized incidents or reinforced stereotypes. Activists harnessed social media to share authentic stories, educational content, and real-time updates, bypassing traditional gatekeepers and cultivating informed grassroots support. Collaborations with journalists and content creators helped shape nuanced narratives, highlighting systemic patterns rather than isolated events. Internal movement challenges. Sustaining momentum required managing internal tensions and diverse perspectives within the movement. Debates over strategies, priorities, and messaging surfaced, reflecting the complexity of systemic change. Efforts to center marginalized voices, including Black women and LGBTQ+ individuals, strengthened inclusivity and representation. Building leadership capacity, addressing burnout, and fostering intergenerational collaboration were ongoing concerns. Strategic approaches, coalition building across racial, socio-economic, and ideological lines broadened support and legitimacy, Partnerships with labor unions, faith groups, and professional associations expanded reach. Legal advocacy combined with grassroots mobilization created pressure on policymakers. Strategic litigation challenged unjust laws and practices, while public demonstrations sustained visibility. Engagement in policy processes, from drafting legislation to serving on oversight boards, ensured community voices influenced decisions. Innovative use of technology enhanced organizing, fundraising and communications, international solidarity, global movements for racial justice and police reform shared lessons and supported each other through exchanges, joint actions, and mutual amplification of voices. International human rights frameworks provided leverage in advocating for domestic reforms. Looking ahead, the path to justice remains challenging but hopeful. Activists emphasize adaptability, persistence, and community-centered approaches. Maya Thompson's journey exemplifies the courage and resilience required to navigate resistance and build enduring change. The movement's continued success depends on learning from setbacks, embracing diverse tactics, and fostering inclusive leadership. In the next part, we will explore how legal reforms are shaping the landscape, including recent landmark cases, new legislation, and evolving jurisprudence, influencing police accountability. Before the video went viral, before protests filled the streets and news cameras showed up on her doorstep, Maya Thompson was just another face in her neighborhood. But Maya's story was anything but ordinary. Born and raised in the same city where the incident took place, Maya was deeply rooted in her community. She lived in a modest apartment complex on the east side, a part of town often overlooked by those outside its borders. To her neighbors, she was known as a hard-working mother, a friend, and someone who cared about the people around her. Maya's days started early. She worked as a nurse's assistant at a local hospital, a job she had held for nearly a decade. The work was demanding, long hours, emotional strain, and little recognition. But for Maya, it was more than a job. It was a calling. Helping patients, especially the elderly, gave her a sense of purpose. Outside work, Maya was a devoted mother to her 10-year-old son, Elijah. Friends and family described her as fiercely protective and loving. She balanced the weight of providing for her family with the desire to give Elijah a safe, happy childhood. She volunteered at his school whenever she could, organizing book drives and community events. Despite her busy schedule, Maya found time for the small joys in life. Sunday, dinners with family, late-night phone calls with close friends, and quiet evenings reading by the window. She had dreams too, hopes of going back to school for nursing, a desire to make a bigger impact in healthcare, and the quiet wish to see her son thrive. But like many in her community, Maya faced daily challenges. The neighborhood struggled with economic hardships, limited resources, and a strained relationship with local law enforcement. Stories of racial profiling, police violence, and mistrust were not uncommon here. Maya had experienced moments of tension herself, times when she felt watched or judged because of the color of her skin. Still, she tried to live her life with dignity and grace, navigating these challenges with quiet strength. That morning, just hours before the video, Maya had left her apartment early. She had a short walk to the bus stop, a simple routine she had repeated countless times. The day ahead was ordinary, work, errands, and picking up Elijah from school, but ordinary was about to shatter. When the police officer approached her, Maya had no reason to expect what would come next. She had no weapon, no intent to cause trouble, just a woman going about her life. The video showed a calm, composed woman, even as the officer's actions grew more aggressive. But behind that composure was a lifetime of experiences, moments of joy, pain, and perseverance that made her who she was. Her family remembers her as gentle but resilient. Her mother spoke about the strength that ran in their family, passed down through generations. Her friends talked about Maya's unwavering kindness and her refusal to be broken by the world's hardships. And yet, none of them were prepared for the image the viral video would paint of her, a woman caught in a moment of violence that would ripple far beyond her neighborhood. Maya's story before the incident was one of hope and hard work. It was the story of someone who believed in fairness, who respected others, and who sought only to live peacefully. It was a story that many would come to know, not just through headlines, but through the voices of those who loved her. As the video spread, these voices grew louder, insisting that Maya was more than a victim. She was a person with dreams and a future that deserved to be protected. Understanding who Maya was before the incident helps us see the real stakes of what happened. This wasn't just a confrontation caught on camera. It was a moment that threatened to define her life forever. But Maya was not about to let that happen. Her journey from that day forward would be difficult and painful, but it would also reveal her incredible strength and the power of a community. Refusing to stay silent, in the next part, we'll meet the officer, the man whose actions in that viral video would set off a chain of events, shaking a city and challenging a system. The movement for police accountability, galvanized by cases like Maya Thompson's, has precipitated significant legal reforms across the United States. These reforms encompass landmark court rulings, legislative changes, and shifting judicial interpretations that collectively redefine the boundaries of police power and victim rights. This part examines key developments in the legal landscape, illustrating how law and policy evolve in response to demands for justice. Landmark court cases. Several recent court decisions have set precedents affecting police accountability. Graham v. Ducana, 1989, remains a foundational case, establishing the objective reasonableness standard for use of force claims. However, its interpretation has been contentious, often cited in rulings that limit liability. More recent cases have challenged qualified immunity, the doctrine shielding officers unless they violated clearly established law. Notably, Taylor v. Riojas, 2020, narrowed the scope of qualified immunity in egregious conditions of confinement cases. Courts have increasingly scrutinized body camera evidence, emphasizing its role in establishing facts and transparency. However, disputes over access and use persist. In civil rights litigation, survivors like Maya have benefited from precedents recognizing systemic issues and allowing claims based on patterns of misconduct, not just individual acts. State and local legislation, states and municipalities have enacted laws reflecting lessons from high-profile incidents. Use of force restrictions. Many jurisdictions have banned chokeholds, neck restraints, and carotid holds. These bans often come with mandated reporting and training requirements. Duty to intervene. Laws now require officers to intervene and report when witnessing excessive force by colleagues, fostering internal accountability. Early warning systems. Departments implement monitoring systems to identify officers with frequent complaints or use of force incidents, allowing for intervention or retraining. Civilian oversight. Statutes establish or strengthen civilian review boards with subpoena power and investigatory authority. Transparency measures. Laws mandate release of body camera footage in a timely manner and require data collection on stops, arrests, and use of force incidents. often disaggregated by race. Federal legislative initiatives, although comprehensive federal reform has faced hurdles. Notable proposals and actions include the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, passed by the House in 2020, but stalled in the Senate. Proposed sweeping reforms, including ending qualified immunity, banning chokeholds, and creating national policing standards. Executive orders have aimed to improve training, data reporting, and community policing practices. The Department of Justice has used pattern and practice investigations to enforce reforms in departments with histories of misconduct. Evolving jurisprudence, judicial attitudes toward police accountability are gradually evolving. Courts are showing increased willingness to consider systemic factors and institutional policies in liability cases. The scope of clearly established law for qualified immunity is under scrutiny, with some justices advocating for its reform or elimination. Litigation increasingly addresses racial bias explicitly, recognizing it as a civil rights violation. Impact on survivors and communities. Legal reforms offer survivors greater avenues for justice and systemic change. However, challenges remain. Access to justice depends on resources and legal expertise. Delays and procedural hurdles continue to frustrate timely accountability. Legal reforms must be complemented by cultural and institutional changes to be fully effective. Challenges and critiques. Some critics argue reforms do not go far enough, pointing to persistent impunity and the need for alternative accountability mechanisms. Debates continue over balancing officer protections with victim rights, the role of criminal prosecutions, and community control of policing. Looking forward, legal reforms, inspired and pressured by stories like Maya's, signal a shifting tide in police accountability. Continued activism, strategic litigation, and policy advocacy are essential to deepen and sustain these changes. Understanding the interplay between law, policy, and lived experience remains crucial to advancing justice. In the next part, we will explore the role of education and training in transforming policing culture and practices, highlighting innovative programs and ongoing challenges. The demand for justice, sparked by Maya Thompson's case, and similar incidents brought into sharp focus the critical role of education and training in shaping policing culture. Reform advocates and law enforcement agencies have increasingly recognized that transforming police behavior requires more than policy changes. It demands a deep, systemic overhaul of how officers are recruited, trained, and continuously developed. This part examines innovative training programs, educational reforms, and the challenges of embedding new values within policing institutions. Re-evaluating police training. Traditional police training has historically emphasized tactics, use of force, and legal procedures, with comparatively less focus on cultural competence, ethics, or community engagement. This imbalance contributed to adversarial policing styles and misunderstandings that often escalate conflicts. In response, many academies have revamped curricula to include implicit bias training, helping officers recognize and mitigate unconscious prejudices affecting decision-making. De-escalation techniques, prioritizing communication and conflict resolution to reduce reliance on force. Cultural competency, educating officers about the histories, cultures, and experiences of diverse communities they serve. Trauma-informed policing, understanding the impact of trauma on behavior to improve responses and interactions. Ethics and accountability, reinforcing values of integrity, transparency, and respect. These elements aim to foster empathy, professionalism, and sound judgment from the earliest stages of an officer's career. Community-based training approaches. Some departments collaborate with community groups, activists, and experts to co-design and deliver training. This inclusion builds mutual understanding and embeds community priorities into policing culture. Programs involving role-playing, scenario-based learning, and real-world exposure to diverse communities help officers internalize lessons beyond theoretical knowledge. Peer mentoring and continuous professional development ensure ongoing learning beyond initial academy training. Specialized training for crisis intervention, given the frequent involvement of police in mental health crises. Specialized crisis intervention training equips officers to respond effectively. Models, such as crisis intervention teams, CIT, train officers to recognize mental health issues, use de-escalation, and connect individuals with appropriate services, reducing harm and unnecessary arrests. Integration of mental health professionals alongside or within police units enhances response quality. Challenges in implementation. Despite advances, challenges remain. Inconsistency, training quality, and content vary widely across jurisdictions, leading to uneven application of best practices. Resistance. Some officers and unions resist reforms perceived as undermining authority or adding burdens. Resource constraints, limited funding and staffing affect the ability to provide comprehensive and ongoing training. Measurement and accountability. Assessing the effectiveness of training programs and ensuring behavioral change requires robust evaluation mechanisms. Leadership and culture. Change training alone cannot transform entrenched cultures without supportive leadership. Police chiefs and supervisors play crucial roles in modeling values, enforcing accountability, and fostering open communication. Departments embracing transparent disciplinary processes and rewarding community-oriented policing cultivate environments conducive to change. Collaborations with academia and experts, partnerships with universities, social scientists and training experts enhance curriculum development and research into effective policing practices. Evidence-based approaches grounded in social science improve program design and implementation. Technology and innovation. Virtual reality, VR, and simulation technologies provide immersive training experiences, allowing officers to practice de-escalation and decision-making in realistic, controlled settings. These tools enable safe exposure to complex scenarios and facilitate feedback-driven learning, incorporating survivor and community perspectives, involving survivors like Maya Thompson and community members in training design and delivery ensures that police learn from lived experience. Their testimonies and insights bring authenticity and urgency, fostering empathy and accountability. The path ahead. Sustained investment, policy support, and community engagement are essential to embed transformative training and education in policing. Reforms must be ongoing, adaptive, and inclusive, reflecting evolving societal expectations and challenges. Maya's case illustrates that meaningful culture change within policing institutions is both possible and necessary for justice. In the next part, we will explore the psychological and emotional impact of police violence on survivors and communities, addressing trauma, healing, and support systems that enable recovery and empowerment. The brutal assault on Maya Thompson and countless similar incidents reveal not only physical harm, but deep psychological and emotional wounds inflicted on survivors and their communities. The trauma of police violence ripples through individuals, families, and social networks, creating layers of suffering that demand recognition and comprehensive care. This part explores the multifaceted impact of such trauma, approaches to healing, and the critical role of support systems in fostering recovery and resilience. Understanding trauma from police violence. Experiences of police violence can cause complex trauma, a profound psychological response involving fear, helplessness, and violation of personal safety and dignity. For survivors like Maya, the trauma often extends beyond the immediate assault to include post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, intrusive memories, flashbacks, hypervigilance, and avoidance behaviors related to the incident, depression and anxiety, persistent sadness, hopelessness, panic attacks, and generalized fear, trust and attachment issues, difficulties in trusting authorities, institutions, or even close relationships, identity and self-worth, damage to self-esteem, and feelings of dehumanization. These effects compound if survivors face disbelief, victim-blaming, or lack of accountability from authorities and society. Community-wide psychological effects. Police violence affects not only individuals, but also the collective psyche of communities, particularly marginalized groups. Vicarious trauma. Witnessing violence or its aftermath through media or social networks can cause secondary trauma. Collective grief and anger. Shared mourning for victims and outrage at systemic injustice fuel community mobilization, but also emotional exhaustion. Fear and alienation. Heightened perceptions of threat and alienation from institutions exacerbate social fragmentation. Intergenerational impact. Trauma passes through families, influencing younger generations' well-being and worldview. Barriers to healing. Survivors often confront obstacles in accessing mental health care. Stigma, cultural, racial, and gender-based. Stigma deters seeking support. Lack of culturally competent services. Many providers lack training in addressing trauma rooted in systemic racism and police violence. Financial and structural barriers, cost, insurance issues, and limited availability. Restrict access. Distrust of systems. Survivors may distrust healthcare institutions perceived as aligned with law enforcement or government. Approaches to healing. Effective healing strategies encompass multiple dimensions. Trauma-informed care. Services that recognize trauma's impact and provide safety, empowerment, and collaboration. Culturally responsive therapy. Providers integrate survivors' cultural contexts, identities, and experiences into treatment. Peer support and survivor networks. Connection with others who share similar experiences fosters understanding and reduces isolation. Community-based healing, rituals, storytelling, and collective actions honor pain and promote solidarity. Holistic wellness, incorporating physical health, spirituality, and creative expression, supports comprehensive recovery. Role of advocacy and empowerment. For many survivors, activism itself becomes a pathway to healing, transforming pain into purpose. Engagement in movements and advocacy provides agency, community, and a sense of justice, mitigating feelings of helplessness. Empowerment-oriented programs teach self-advocacy and leadership skills, enhancing resilience. Support systems successful. Recovery depends on networks of support, family and friends. Emotional sustenance and practical assistance are foundational. Community organizations offer counseling, legal aid, and resources tailored to survivors of police violence. Mental health professionals, trauma specialists, counselors, and therapists provide individualized care. Faith and spiritual communities often provide meaning-making, comfort, and rituals that facilitate healing. Challenges in building support. Infrastructure. Many communities, especially those marginalized, lack sufficient support services. Funding and policy priorities often overlook mental health needs related to police violence. Collaboration between healthcare, legal, and advocacy sectors remains fragmented. Moving toward justice and healing. Addressing the psychological toll of police. Violence is integral to broader justice efforts. Policies must integrate mental health care, trauma-informed policing, and community investment. Maya Thompson's story illustrates the interplay between personal healing and systemic change, showing that justice involves restoring both safety and dignity. In the next part, we will examine how technology and social media have transformed activism and public awareness, shaping narratives and mobilizing support for justice movements. In the wake of Maya Thompson's harrowing experience and the viral video that exposed her assault, technology and social media have proven to be powerful catalysts in the fight for justice. These digital tools have reshaped how activists organize, how the public learns about systemic abuses, and how narratives are controlled and challenged. This part explores the multifaceted role of technology and social media in transforming activism, amplifying voices, and mobilizing communities. The power of viral videos. The video capturing Maya's assault acted as a critical turning point, breaking through media gatekeeping and sparking national outrage. In an era when smartphones and affordable cameras are ubiquitous, moments of injustice can be documented and disseminated instantly. Viral videos bypass traditional news filters, reaching global audiences in real time. They provide undeniable visual evidence, countering official accounts or denials. However, the virality of such footage also raises ethical questions about privacy, re-traumatization, and sensationalism, necessitating responsible sharing practices. Mobilizing. Digital activism social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, have become hubs for organizing protests, fundraising, and spreading information. Hashtags like "Do Justice for Maya" and "Do End Police Violence" rally supporters, foster solidarity, and maintain visibility for issues that might otherwise be ignored. Live streaming events, virtual town halls, and online petitions expand participation beyond geographic boundaries, engaging diverse demographics. Digital campaigns create pressure on policymakers, institutions, and corporations, linking consumer actions to social justice demands. Narrative control and counter-messaging technology enables activists to challenge dominant narratives perpetuated by mainstream media or official sources. Through blogs, podcasts, and independent journalism, communities tell their own stories, centering survivors' voices and contextualizing incidents within systemic patterns. Multimedia storytelling, combining video, audio, text, and graphics, engages audiences emotionally and intellectually. Conversely, opponents may use social media to spread misinformation or discredit activists, requiring ongoing digital literacy and fact-checking efforts. Building online. Communities' digital platforms foster communities of support and learning for survivors, activists, and allies. Closed groups provide safe spaces to share experiences, resources, and strategies without fear of harassment. Global connections facilitate cross-cultural exchanges and solidarity, linking local struggles to international human rights movements. These networks amplify marginalized voices and nurture leadership development. Challenges and limitations. Despite its power, technology has limitations. Digital divide. Access to technology and the internet remains uneven, potentially excluding some voices. Surveillance and censorship. Activists face monitoring, harassment, or content removal by authorities or platform algorithms. Short attention spans. The fast pace of online discourse risks fleeting engagement, requiring sustained efforts to maintain momentum. Echo chambers. Social media algorithms may reinforce biases by showing users content that aligns with existing views, limiting exposure to diverse perspectives. Innovations and tools advancements in technology offer new tools for justice work. Data analytics, mapping incidents of police violence, helps identify hotspots and inform policy advocacy. Encrypted communication. Secure messaging apps protect organizers and survivors from surveillance. AI and machine learning assist in analyzing large volumes of data, monitoring online harassment, and verifying facts. Virtual reality, emerging VR projects recreate experiences of police violence to educate and foster empathy. Impact on public policy and accountability. Digital activism has influenced legislation, investigations, and institutional reforms. Public pressure from viral content has led to reopening cases, criminal charges, and departmental changes. Technology enables real-time monitoring of police actions, enhancing transparency. Maya Thompson's digital legacy. Maya's story exemplifies how digital evidence and social media advocacy can transform a personal tragedy into a movement for systemic change. Her case inspired countless others to record, share, and demand justice, reshaping the landscape of civil rights activism. Looking ahead, harnessing technology's potential while mitigating its risks requires continuous innovation, ethical standards, and inclusive access. The digital age offers unprecedented opportunities to democratize activism and amplify marginalized voices. In the next part, we will explore the intersection of art, culture, and activism. How creative expressions inspire, document, and sustain the struggle for justice. In the aftermath of Maya Thompson's story capturing global attention, the role of art and culture emerged as a profound force in the ongoing struggle for justice and systemic change. Beyond protests and legal battles, creative expressions have become powerful tools to inspire, document, and sustain activism. This part explores how music, visual art, literature, theater, and digital media shape narratives, mobilize communities, and preserve histories of resistance. Art as a language of resistance. Art provides a universal language that transcends barriers of race, language, and geography. Through symbolism, metaphor, and emotion, it conveys complex social realities in ways that statistics or news reports cannot. Artists have long played pivotal roles in social movements, using their craft to critique injustice, envision alternatives, and foster empathy. Maya's case inspired murals, songs, and performances that embodied collective grief, rage, and hope, helping communities process trauma and galvanize action. Murals and street art, public art, particularly murals and graffiti, transforms urban landscapes into canvases of resistance. Vibrant depictions of Maya and other victims became memorials honoring their lives and symbols of defiance against oppression. Street art democratizes expression, accessible to all and impossible to silence entirely. It invites public engagement, challenges dominant narratives, and claims space for marginalized voices. Community mural projects involve residents in creation, fostering solidarity and ownership of the movement's visual language. Music and spoken Word songs and spoken word poetry articulate lived experiences, amplify messages, and unite diverse audiences through rhythm and storytelling. Artists blend genres, from hip-hop to folk, to narrate the realities of police violence and racial injustice. Benefit concerts and musical tributes raise funds and awareness, building bridges between artists and activists. Lyrics often become chants in protests, embedding cultural memory into the movement's soundtrack. Literature and memoirs books. Essays and memoirs provide deep dives into personal and collective histories, offering context and nuanced perspectives. Survivors, family members, and scholars document the systemic roots of police violence and pathways toward healing and reform. Literary works also challenge societal complacency, inviting readers into critical reflection and empathy. Maya's story entered this canon, inspiring writers to explore themes of resilience and transformation. Theatre and performance. Art theatre offers embodied storytelling, bringing to life the emotional and social dynamics of injustice. Performances reimagine historical events, create dialogues between audiences and artists, and explore possibilities for change. Community theatre projects engage marginalized groups in sharing their stories, reclaiming narrative agency. Interactive and immersive performances deepen engagement, prompting audiences to confront uncomfortable truths. Digital and multimedia art. Digital platforms enable innovative art forms combining visuals, sound, interactivity, and narrative. Virtual exhibitions, augmented reality installations, and online galleries expand reach and accessibility. These forms allow artists to experiment with new modes of storytelling and audience participation. Maya's case-inspired digital campaigns and artworks that reached global audiences instantly, creating virtual spaces for solidarity and education. Art as healing and empowerment. Creative expression serves therapeutic roles for survivors and activists, providing outlets for trauma processing and emotional release. Art workshops and collectives foster community bonds, build skills, and nurture leadership. By reclaiming narratives through art, marginalized communities assert dignity and agency. Challenges in artistic activism. Artists navigating activism face challenges including censorship, commodification, and the risk of message dilution. Balancing aesthetic innovation with political clarity requires careful consideration. Sustaining artistic activism demands resources, institutional support, and protection for creators. Building alliances between artists and activists. Cross-sector collaborations enhance impact, combining artistic creativity with strategic organizing. Artists contribute to movement branding, education, and fundraising, while activists provide context and direction. Such partnerships amplify voices and broaden engagement across cultural and social boundaries. The legacy of artistic resistance. The cultural productions inspired by Maya Thompson's case become part of a living archive, preserving memories and lessons for future generations. Art sustains movements beyond moments of protest, nurturing ongoing reflection and action. Through creative expression, justice movements continue to challenge oppression and imagine more equitable futures. Looking forward, supporting artistic activism through funding, platforms, and policy recognition strengthens social justice movements. Encouraging diverse and inclusive artistic voices ensures representation and richness of narratives. Maya's story, woven into cultural expressions, continues to inspire hope, courage, and transformation. In the next part, we will examine the international dimensions of police violence and reform, how global solidarity and comparative perspectives enrich local struggles. Maya Thompson's case, while rooted in a specific local and national context, resonates far beyond the United States. Police violence is a global phenomenon, affecting communities worldwide, each grappling with their own histories of systemic injustice and state repression. This part explores how international solidarity and comparative perspectives enrich local struggles, offering new strategies, shared knowledge, and amplified advocacy in the fight for justice. Global prevalence of police violence, from the streets of Paris to the favelas of Rio de Janeiro, from Johannesburg to Hong Kong, police brutality disproportionately targets marginalized groups, racial minorities, indigenous peoples, migrants, and political activists. Patterns of excessive force, impunity, and institutional racism echo across continents, reflecting broader structures of inequality and authoritarian governance. Despite cultural and political differences, affected communities share experiences of trauma, resistance, and demands for accountability. International movements and solidarity movements, such as Black Lives Matter, have transcended national borders, inspiring protests and campaigns globally. Activists use social media and digital platforms to connect struggles, share stories, and coordinate actions, building transnational solidarity networks. Global days of protest highlight issues of policing and racial justice worldwide, fostering awareness and pressure on governments. Solidarity extends beyond protest, encompassing mutual aid, legal support, and cultural exchange. Comparative legal and policy approaches, examining policing reforms in different countries, provides valuable lessons. Community policing models. Some Scandinavian countries emphasize relationship building and social service, integration, accountability mechanisms. Independent oversight bodies in countries like Canada and the UK offer models for civilian control. Use of force regulations. Nations vary widely in legal standards, offering frameworks for restrictive policies. Demilitarization efforts. Some countries successfully limit military-grade equipment in policing, reducing escalation. Comparative analysis helps identify effective strategies adaptable to local contexts. International human rights frameworks. United Nations treaties and mechanisms provide standards for policing and human rights, including the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, guarantees protection against torture and excessive force. The UN Basic Principles on the use of force and firearms by law enforcement officials set guidelines for proportionality and necessity. Special rapporteurs and treaty bodies investigate and report on abuses, pressuring states for compliance. International law reinforces domestic accountability efforts and offers recourse when national systems fail. Challenges in global contexts, political repression, weak judicial independence, and corruption hinder reforms in many countries. Authoritarian regimes often use policing as a tool of control, suppressing dissent and violating rights with impunity. Civil society organizations face repression, making activism dangerous and complicated. Cross-cultural exchange and learning global conferences, workshops and networks facilitate exchange among activists, policymakers and researchers. Sharing tactics, successes and failures enriches movements, fostering innovation and resilience. Digital platforms enable virtual learning and collaboration, overcoming geographic barriers. The role of diaspora and exiled activists. Diaspora communities often act as bridges, mobilizing international support for struggles in their countries of origin. Exiled activists raise awareness, lobby foreign governments, and maintain pressure on home regimes. They contribute to global discourse and advocacy for police reform and human rights. Impact on local movements. International solidarity can amplify local demands, legitimizing struggles and attracting media attention. However, activists navigate tensions between global agendas and local specificities, ensuring relevance and authenticity. Global pressure sometimes influences domestic policy shifts and judicial outcomes. Technology and transnational activism, technological tools facilitate coordination of protests, sharing of evidence, and real-time communication across borders. Crowdsourcing platforms fund legal defense and humanitarian aid internationally. Data mapping and open-source investigations document abuses and connect cases globally. The future of global justice movements. As policing and surveillance become increasingly globalized, so do resistance movements. Transnational coalitions advocate for international accountability mechanisms, including universal jurisdiction and international criminal prosecutions. Global justice movements increasingly integrate intersections of race, class, gender, and migration, fostering inclusive solidarity. Maya Thompson's story in a global context. Her experience adds to the mosaic of global struggles against state violence, inspiring activists worldwide. International support bolsters her case's impact and contributes to a shared vision of justice. Looking ahead, strengthening global networks and mechanisms enhances local capacity to demand accountability and reform. Recognition of policing as a global human rights issue encourages comprehensive strategies. In the next part, we will turn to the evolving role of media in shaping public perception and influencing justice outcomes, examining challenges, responsibilities, and innovations. The case of Maya Thompson, propelled into the spotlight by viral video footage and relentless media coverage, underscores the pivotal role of media in shaping public perception of police violence and influencing justice outcomes. As traditional journalism converges with new digital media, the ways stories are told, disseminated, and consumed are rapidly evolving. This part examines the challenges, responsibilities, and innovations shaping media's role in social justice struggles. Traditional media's influence historically. Newspapers, television, and radio have been primary sources of information, framing narratives around police actions and public safety. Mainstream media's coverage often determines public awareness, agenda setting, and political discourse. However, traditional outlets have faced criticism for biases, sensationalism, and selective reporting that sometimes reinforce stereotypes or omit systemic context. In Maya's case, initial local media coverage was limited, prompting activists to seek alternative channels to tell her story fully. Rise of digital and social media. Digital platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, offer immediacy and democratization, allowing anyone with a smartphone to report, incidents and reach mass audiences, social media enables rapid viral spread of evidence, mobilizing public opinion and grassroots action. Journalists increasingly source stories and leads from user-generated content, blurring lines between professional and citizen journalism. However, social media's algorithmic design can create echo chambers and misinformation risks, challenging accurate understanding. Citizen journalism and community storytelling. Community members play vital roles in documenting and sharing experiences, often filling gaps left by mainstream media. Grassroots media projects elevate marginalized voices and counter dominant narratives. Platforms hosting podcasts, blogs, and independent video channels provide nuanced, sustained engagement with issues. Maya's video became a cornerstone of community storytelling, providing unfiltered evidence and personal testimony. Media framing and narrative control. How media frames stories affects public empathy, attributions of blame, and policy responses. Framing Maya's case as isolated misconduct versus part of systemic problems influences perceptions and reform momentum. Some outlets focus on sensational or divisive angles, risking polarizing discourse. Responsible journalism aims to balance compelling storytelling with context, accuracy, and ethical sensitivity. Ethical considerations. Media must navigate challenges including respecting survivors' privacy, avoiding re-traumatization, and unauthorized exposure. Avoiding victim blaming, challenging stereotypes and biases, contextualizing incidents, providing background on systemic issues, not just isolated events. Transparency and accountability, correcting errors and disclosing conflicts of interest. Maya's advocates emphasized media accountability to ensure her story served justice rather than exploitation. Investigative journalism and accountability. Investigative reporters play critical roles in uncovering abuses, patterns, and institutional failures. Collaborations between media outlets, non-profits, and legal experts strengthen investigative capacity. In-depth reporting on police misconduct informs public debates and legislative reforms. Media as a platform for advocacy. Media amplifies activists' voices, providing platforms for calls to action, education, and mobilization. Live broadcasts of protests, interviews with survivors, and expert analyses engage wide audiences. Campaigns leveraging media shape policy agendas and electoral politics. Challenges: misinformation and media manipulation, disinformation campaigns, deepfakes, and coordinated harassment undermine truthful reporting and activism. Activists and journalists develop fact-checking initiatives, media literacy programs, and digital security measures. Innovations in media technology. Data journalism uses visualization and big data to reveal trends in policing and justice. Interactive documentaries and virtual reality immerse audiences in survivor experiences, fostering empathy. Collaborative newsrooms and open-source platforms facilitate transparency and participation. Media's role in justice outcomes. Public pressure from media coverage has led to reopened investigations, charges against officers, and policy changes. However, media attention can be fleeting, necessitating sustained engagement for lasting impact. Maya's case demonstrated how media exposure can catalyze legal and social responses. Building media. Literacy and trust educating audiences to critically evaluate sources and narratives enhances democratic participation. Building trust between communities and media requires transparency, accountability, and representation. The future of media and social justice as media ecosystems evolve, balancing speed, accuracy, and ethics is paramount. Collaborations across media, technology, and activism sectors promise innovative approaches. Media continues to be a battleground where narratives of justice and injustice are contested and forged. Looking ahead. The story of Maya Thompson highlights media's dual power and responsibility. Harnessing media's potential ethically and effectively remains essential in the ongoing fight against police violence. In the next part, we will explore legal advocacy strategies, including litigation, policy campaigns, and coalition building, that drive systemic change. Maya Thompson's case did more than expose the raw injustice of police brutality. It illuminated the multifaceted legal advocacy necessary to transform isolated incidents into systemic reform. Behind every headline and viral video lies a complex web of legal battles, policy initiatives, and collaborative efforts that push institutions toward accountability and justice. This part delves into the core strategies of legal advocacy, shaping the fight against police violence, highlighting litigation, policy campaigns, and coalition building. Strategic litigation, pursuing justice. Through courts, litigation is a cornerstone of legal advocacy, serving both to seek redress for victims and to establish precedents that constrain abusive practices. Civil rights lawsuits. Cases like Maya's often invoke federal statutes such as 42 U.S.C. paragraph 1983, which permits individuals to sue state actors for violations of constitutional rights, including excessive force and unlawful arrest. Qualified immunity challenges. Overcoming the legal shield of qualified immunity remains a significant hurdle. Advocates craft precise legal arguments and gather robust evidence to demonstrate clearly established violations. Class action and pattern and practice suits. Litigation may target not just individual officers, but entire departments or municipalities, addressing systemic misconduct and demanding institutional reforms. Injunctions and consent decrees. Courts may impose binding agreements requiring police departments to implement specific reforms, monitored by independent agencies. Criminal proceedings. Legal advocacy also supports the prosecution of officers where appropriate, working alongside or complementing civil actions. Policy campaigns, shaping legislation and institutional practices. Legal advocacy extends beyond courts into legislative arenas, aiming to enact laws that redefine policing standards and accountability. Model legislation. Advocates develop and promote bills banning chokeholds, requiring body cameras, or ending qualified immunity. Ballot initiatives. In some jurisdictions, activists pursue direct democracy measures to compel reform. Administrative rulemaking. Engaging in regulatory processes shapes police department policies, training standards, and oversight mechanisms. Engagement with elected officials. Building relationships with lawmakers secures sponsorship and support for reform. Measures. Public education. Informing the electorate about policy issues builds grassroots support essential for sustained reform. Coalition building, uniting diverse actors for greater impact. No single group can dismantle entrenched systems alone. Coalition building leverages the strengths of diverse organizations. Civil rights groups, organizations like the NAACP, ACLU, and local grassroots collectives provide legal expertise and mobilization capacity. Community organizations, churches, neighborhood associations, and advocacy groups root reform in affected communities' priorities. Labor unions and professional associations, engaging police unions and reform-minded officers, facilitates internal change. Academic institutions, research centers provide empirical data and policy analysis supporting advocacy goals. Media and cultural groups, partnerships enhance message dissemination and public engagement. Effective coalitions build consensus, pool resources, and coordinate campaigns across multiple fronts. Legal advocacy and intersectionality, recognizing how race, class, gender, and other identities intersect shapes comprehensive advocacy strategies. Tailoring approaches to address the specific vulnerabilities of women, LGBTQ+ individuals, immigrants, and disabled persons ensures inclusivity. Maya's story, as a Black woman, highlights the need to confront intersecting forms of discrimination in policing and justice, challenges in legal advocacy, resource constraints. Litigation is costly and time-consuming. Sustained funding is vital. Political resistance, powerful interests, and institutional inertia resist reforms. Public misinformation, advocacy efforts must counter narratives that blame victims or downplay systemic issues. Balancing urgency and strategy. Advocates must balance immediate case needs with long-term systemic goals. Innovative legal strategies impact litigation, selecting cases with potential to set precedents and drive broad reforms. Community lawyering, grounding legal work in community engagement and empowerment. Collaborative lawyering, lawyers working alongside activists, survivors, and policymakers. Use of technology, leveraging digital evidence and data analysis in legal arguments. Success stories and lessons. Learned. Legal advocacy has led to tangible changes, including adoption of use of force policies, banning specific tactics. Establishment of independent civilian oversight boards. Court-ordered reforms in police departments nationwide, increased transparency through mandatory body camera programs. Maya's case contributed to these advances, inspiring activists and attorneys alike. Looking forward, continued innovation, coalition building, and community-centered approaches are essential. Legal advocacy must adapt to emerging challenges and seize opportunities presented by changing political landscapes. Maya's journey exemplifies the power of coordinated legal efforts to transform personal tragedy into collective progress. In the next part, we will explore the role of mental health professionals and social workers in supporting survivors and communities affected by police violence. The traumatic experiences of individuals like Maya Thompson and the collective wounds borne by their communities call for compassionate and skilled mental health support. Beyond the legal battles and public advocacy, the role of mental health professionals and social workers is crucial in addressing the psychological aftermath of police violence and fostering resilience. This part delves into the multifaceted contributions of these professionals in healing individuals, strengthening communities, and informing systemic reform. Understanding the psychological impact police violence inflicts deep psychological harm that often extends far beyond the immediate victims. Survivors may experience post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, depression, anxiety, and complex grief. Communities living under persistent threat or witnessing repeated violence endure chronic stress, which can manifest as collective trauma. Mental health professionals recognize these impacts as not only individual clinical issues, but also as social and cultural phenomena requiring holistic approaches. Trauma-informed care. A foundation for healing trauma-informed care principles guide mental health and social work practices in this context. Safety. Creating environments where survivors feel physically and emotionally secure. Trustworthiness and transparency. Building clear, respectful relationships to foster trust. Peer support, encouraging connections among those with shared experiences to reduce isolation. Collaboration and empowerment, valuing survivors' autonomy and involving them actively in their care. Cultural, historical, and gender awareness, acknowledging how identity and systemic oppression shape trauma and healing. Professionals trained in trauma-informed approaches tailor interventions to survivors' unique needs and contexts. Clinical interventions and therapeutic modalities, individual therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, and narrative therapy help survivors process trauma and rebuild coping mechanisms. Group therapy provides communal spaces for shared healing, validation, and mutual support. Family and systems therapy addresses relational dynamics impacted by trauma, fostering supportive networks. Crisis intervention. Immediate support during or after traumatic events stabilizes survivors and links them to ongoing care. Community-based mental health initiatives. Recognizing barriers to accessing traditional services, many programs operate within communities. Mobile crisis units deploy teams that include mental health professionals alongside social workers to respond to emergencies, offering alternatives to police intervention. Culturally specific services, programs designed to meet the linguistic, cultural, and historical needs of marginalized communities, improve engagement and effectiveness. Healing circles and restorative practices. Community gatherings that promote dialogue, reconciliation, and collective resilience. Training community leaders, equipping trusted figures with mental health skills to extend support informally. Social works advocacy and systems. Role social workers act as advocates for survivors navigating complex legal, medical, and social systems. They help coordinate services, ensure survivor rights, and promote policies that address social determinants of health. Their dual role bridges individual care and systemic change, addressing root causes of trauma such as poverty, racism, and discrimination. Collaborations. Across disciplines, effective support involves partnerships among mental health professionals, legal advocates, community organizations, and activists. Shared training and communication improve coordination and survivor-centered approaches. Maya Thompson's support network included therapists, social workers, and legal counsel collaborating closely to address her multifaceted needs. Challenges and barriers. Stigma. Mental health stigma within some communities can deter individuals from seeking help. Resource limitations. Underfunded mental health. Services limit availability and quality. Distrust. Historical abuses and systemic racism contribute to skepticism of formal institutions. Burnout. Providers working with trauma survivors face risk of secondary trauma and burnout, underscoring the need for professional support. Innovations in mental health support, telehealth, and digital platforms expand access, particularly in underserved areas. Peer support programs empower survivors to support others, creating sustainable community care. Trauma-informed policing training, incorporating mental health perspectives into police training to reduce harm. Policy advocacy. Mental health professionals engage in shaping policies that fund and improve services, impact on survivor empowerment. Access to culturally competent, trauma-informed care enhances survivors' capacity to reclaim agency and participate fully in justice processes. Healing supports emotional resilience necessary for sustained activism and community leadership. Looking forward, integrating mental health care into broader justice initiatives is essential for holistic reform. Investing in community-centered, accessible, and culturally responsive services strengthens social fabric. Maya's story reflects the critical intersection of healing and justice, reminding us that true accountability encompasses care and restoration. In the next part, we will explore grassroots organizing and community-led solutions as vital engines of change and empowerment. Maya Thompson's journey from victim to advocate illuminates the transformative power of grassroots organizing and community-led solutions in combating police violence and systemic injustice. Beyond legal proceedings and institutional reforms, it is local communities themselves that often hold the key to sustained change and empowerment. This part explores how grassroots activism shapes social movements, fosters resilience, and builds alternatives rooted in community needs and values. The essence of grassroots. Grassroots organizing involves collective action, driven by those most affected by injustice. It prioritizes community voices, shared leadership, and direct engagement with local realities. Unlike top-down approaches, grassroots movements cultivate trust and accountability within neighborhoods and networks. Maya's community in her hometown became a hub of activism, organizing rallies, educating residents, and supporting survivors. Building leadership. From within, a fundamental aspect of grassroots work is nurturing leadership among community members, including survivors, youth, and elders. Training programs, mentorship, and participatory decision-making empower individuals to take active roles. Maya's emergence as a community leader exemplifies how personal experience fuels advocacy and inspires others. Leadership development ensures movements remain rooted and responsive, avoiding external co-optation. Community-based strategies for change. Grassroots groups employ diverse tactics, direct action, protests, sit-ins, and demonstrations raise awareness and demand accountability. Mutual aid. Sharing resources like food, legal aid, and mental health support addresses immediate needs and builds solidarity. Education campaigns. Workshops, cultural events, and media projects inform residents about rights, policies, and organizing. Skills. Policy advocacy. Local lobbying efforts push for reforms, such as civilian oversight boards, budget reallocations, and policing alternatives. Healing and resilience. Within communities affected by police violence often face compounded trauma and marginalization. Grassroots organizing incorporates healing practices, cultural rituals, storytelling, and peer support to sustain participants. Collective resilience emerges from shared struggle, strengthening social cohesion and hope. Challenges faced by grassroots movements: resource scarcity. Funding constraints limit capacity, especially for sustained campaigns. Repression and surveillance. Activists may face intimidation, arrests, or infiltration. Burnout. Emotional and physical exhaustion threatens movement sustainability. Fragmentation. Divergent priorities and strategies can cause divisions. Effective organizing requires addressing these challenges through self-care, coalition building, and inclusive practices. Innovations and adaptations. Grassroots movements leverage technology for communication, fundraising, and mobilization. Hybrid models, combining in-person and virtual engagement, expand reach. Intersectional frameworks ensure inclusivity of marginalized groups and address overlapping oppressions. Experiential learning and adaptability keep movements responsive to changing conditions. Community-led alternatives to policing. Some communities pioneer alternative models to traditional policing, emphasizing prevention and restorative justice. Community safety teams, trained local responders, address conflicts, mental health crises, and violence without law enforcement. Restorative justice circles facilitate dialogue and healing between victims and offenders. Economic and social development, initiatives targeting root causes of crime, such as poverty and lack of opportunity. Maya's community discussions included envisioning such alternatives, seeking holistic safety. Coalitions and networks. Local groups connect through regional and national coalitions, sharing strategies and amplifying influence. Cross-movement alliances link struggles for racial justice, housing, education, and labor rights. These networks foster solidarity and collective power. Impact and legacy. Grassroots activism played a vital role in advancing Maya's case from a private tragedy to a public movement. Community organizing sustains pressure for reform and ensures accountability beyond headlines. It also builds lasting structures for empowerment and change. Looking forward, investing in grassroots capacity is essential for enduring social transformation. Supporting community leadership, resources, and autonomy strengthens democracy and justice. Maya's story embodies the enduring power of collective action, rooted in lived experience and shared humanity. In the final part, we will reflect on the lessons learned from Maya Thompson's case and envision pathways toward a more just and equitable future. Behind the badge, uniform, and authority stood a man whose actions that day would not only alter the course of one woman's life, but also ignite a firestorm of outrage and debate. His name was Officer Daniel Mercer, a veteran of the police force, with over 15 years on the job. To some, he was simply doing his duty. To many others, he became the symbol of systemic failure and abuse of power. Officer Mercer grew up in a small suburban town, the eldest son in a family with a long line of law enforcement officers. From a young age, he had admired his father and uncle, both police officers themselves, and dreamed of following in their footsteps. His entry into the police academy was met with pride from his community, and his graduation was celebrated by family and friends alike. Early in his career, Mercer was known for his dedication. He worked patrols in rough neighborhoods, responded to calls with determination, and earned a reputation for toughness. But like many officers, his career was also marked by controversies. Some whispered quietly within precinct walls, others documented in reports. Over time, colleagues began to notice his aggressive style. His approach to policing was often confrontational, especially in encounters with minority communities. Several complaints were filed against him for excessive force, racial profiling, and unprofessional conduct. Yet, these complaints rarely led to disciplinary action. In the culture of the force, such reports were often dismissed, viewed as the unavoidable tensions of the job. As Mercer climbed the ranks, his attitude hardened. He believed firmly in law and order, often citing the need to be tough to maintain peace. In training sessions, he was vocal about his skepticism of community policing efforts and reform initiatives. To him, policing was about control and authority, and that mindset shaped every interaction, but none of that would prepare the public for the moment when a single incident captured on a shaky smartphone camera would expose a side of policing many preferred to ignore. The viral video showed Officer Mercer in a way few had seen before, unrestrained, aggressive, and deeply biased. His tone in the video was sharp, his actions swift and uncompromising. It was clear to viewers that this was not a routine police encounter. It was something far more disturbing. Social media users quickly dug into Mercer's history, uncovering patterns of behavior that suggested his actions were not isolated. Community leaders and activists pointed to the broader issue of officers like Mercer, individuals whose unchecked power often led to devastating consequences. Law enforcement. Supporters, meanwhile, painted a different picture. They argued that Mercer was a dedicated officer placed in a difficult situation, forced to make split-second decisions. They cautioned against rushing to judgment based solely on video clips, emphasizing the complexities officers face in the field. Yet the video, unedited and raw, left little room for debate about what happened in that moment. Officer Mercer's aggressive assault on an unarmed woman transcended any claims of self-defense or procedural necessity. In interviews, Mercer remained largely silent. His attorney issued carefully worded statements, expressing confidence in his client's actions and urging patience until all facts were reviewed. Mercer himself declined to comment publicly, leaving the court of public opinion to fill the void. For many, Mercer became a symbol of a policing system in crisis, one where accountability was elusive and bias ran deep. For others, he was a man caught in the tide of public outrage, struggling to defend his career and reputation. The tension between these views played out across media outlets, social platforms, and dinner-table conversations. The question was no longer just about what happened to Maya Thompson. It was about what kind of policing a community would accept and who would be held responsible when things went wrong. As the investigation unfolded, attention turned to the police department itself. How could an officer with Mercer's history remain on the force? What oversight mechanisms had failed, and how would the department respond now that the world was watching? In the coming parts, we'll explore the details of that fateful day. The confrontation as captured in the video, the official and unofficial responses, and the growing movement demanding justice. But to understand the full picture, we must hold both sides in view. the woman whose life was upended, and the officer whose actions sparked a crisis, because this story is about more than a single incident. It's about a community grappling with deep wounds, a system resisting change, and the power of truth in the face of injustice. As we reach the culmination of Maya Thompson's story and the multifaceted struggle it has inspired, it becomes essential to reflect on the profound lessons emerging from her experience and to envision concrete pathways toward a more just and equitable society. This final part synthesizes the insights gained, highlighting the enduring challenges and opportunities that lie ahead in dismantling systemic injustice, transforming institutions, and empowering communities. The power of individual and collective action. Maya's journey underscores the interplay between individual courage and collective mobilization. One person's resilience in the face of violence sparked a movement fueled by communities, activists, legal advocates, and allies across sectors. Her story teaches us that personal trauma can be a catalyst for broader social change when coupled with solidarity and strategic action. At the same time, it reminds us that no individual should bear the burden alone. Systemic problems require collective responsibility and sustained commitment. Intersectionality as a guiding framework. The case reveals the necessity of understanding how race, gender, class, and other identities intersect to shape experiences of oppression and resistance. Addressing police violence demands inclusive approaches that recognize varied vulnerabilities and strengths within affected communities. Programs and policies must be designed to serve all survivors equitably, dismantling layered systems of discrimination. The role of evidence and storytelling, from viral videos to court testimonies, the power of evidence and narrative emerges as central in challenging dominant discourses and mobilizing change. Maya's video pierced through official denials, demanding accountability. The stories we tell and how we tell them shape public consciousness, policy debates, and cultural understandings. Ethical, accurate, and empathetic storytelling is vital in honoring survivors and galvanizing support. The necessity of multi-pronged strategies. The complexity of police violence and systemic racism necessitates multifaceted responses. Legal advocacy pursues accountability and institutional reform. Policy campaigns aim to reshape laws and practices. Grassroots organizing empowers communities and sustains pressure. Mental health support attends to healing and resilience. Art and media influence culture and perception. Siloed efforts risk ineffectiveness. Integrated strategies maximize impact. Institutional change and accountability. Reform must transcend symbolic gestures, embedding structural changes in policing, governance, and social services. Transparency, independent oversight, and community control are key pillars. Moreover, investment in social determinants of safety, education, housing, health addresses root causes of conflict. Technology as a double-edged sword. While technology amplifies voices and documents abuses, it also presents challenges of misinformation, surveillance, and digital inequities. Harnessing technology responsibly requires vigilance, media literacy, and equitable access. The importance of sustained commitment. Change is neither quick nor linear. Maya's case reminds us of the perseverance required to navigate setbacks, co-optation, and fatigue. Building resilient movements and institutions demands ongoing dedication and adaptive learning. building alliances across divides, bridging divides, racial, political, disciplinary, is essential to creating broad coalitions capable of challenging entrenched power. Engaging unlikely allies, fostering dialogue, and prioritizing common goals strengthen the struggle. Empowering future generations. Education, mentorship, and opportunities for youth leadership ensure that the fight for justice continues. Programs inspired by Maya's experience aim to open pathways into activism, advocacy, and community service. Global solidarity and shared struggles. Maya's story connects to worldwide movements confronting state violence and racial oppression. Global networks enrich local efforts through shared knowledge and mutual support. Visioning a just future, more just future, requires reimagining safety, justice, and community in ways that center dignity, equity, and human rights. It calls for rethinking policing, investing in communities, and embracing diverse knowledge systems. Maya's journey serves as a beacon, inspiring hope and action toward these transformative goals. Final reflection. The viral video that brought Maya Thompson's assault to light did more than expose a single act of injustice. It opened a window into systemic failures and the potential for collective empowerment. Her courage, alongside the relentless work of communities, advocates, and allies, offers a roadmap for confronting police violence and building a more equitable society. As we close this story, the work continues, rooted in lessons learned and propelled by the unwavering commitment to justice. The moment captured in that viral video is seared into the memory of countless viewers. It lasts less than 2 minutes, but within that brief span unfolds a sequence of events that would spark outrage, debate, and a quest for justice. Understanding exactly what happened is crucial, yet the video leaves more questions than answers, and the raw footage becomes the starting point for a complex, painful journey. The scene opens on a late afternoon in a bustling city neighborhood, the light beginning to soften as the day moves toward evening. Maya Thompson is walking down a familiar street, dressed casually, hands empty, face calm. There is nothing in her demeanor to suggest conflict or danger. She's minding her own business, on her way to meet a friend after work. Suddenly, Officer Daniel Mercer steps into frame, his uniform unmistakable, his stride purposeful. He approaches Maya with a quickness that startles passers-by. The clip begins, with Mercer shouting commands, words that seem harsh and unnecessary in tone. The camera, held by a bystander from across the street, shakes slightly as the tension escalates. Maya responds calmly at first, holding her hands up slightly, as if to de-escalate. But Mercer's demeanor does not soften. Instead, he advances, grabbing her arm forcefully. The shock of that sudden contact jolts the crowd into motion. Voices rise in alarm. Some nearby pedestrians begin to film. Others shout warnings. What follows is a swift escalation. Mercer pulls Maya roughly, pushing her against a car parked along the curb. The video captures her struggle to stay composed, refusing to retaliate despite the officer's physical dominance. The stark contrast between her restraint and his aggression is undeniable. Mercer's grip tightens. He forcibly takes her to the ground, pressing her down in a manner that appears excessive and unprovoked. Throughout, Maya does not resist beyond trying to shield herself. Her face is visible, eyes wide, reflecting fear and confusion rather than defiance. The crowd grows louder, some yelling at the officer to stop, others calling for help. Yet Mercer continues with a force that suggests anger rather than measured enforcement. The clip ends with officers arriving to assist, but by then the damage, the physical, emotional, and communal damage, has been done. No weapons were drawn, no threats made by Maya, no visible cause for the level of force used, and yet the video left viewers horrified, some outraged, and many questioning how an encounter so violent could happen in broad daylight, under the watch of neighbors and cameras. This was not an isolated misstep. To those who had lived similar experiences or who understood the history of policing in marginalized communities, it was a painful, familiar scene playing out yet again. But what was missing from the video, the context behind the encounter, would become the battleground for competing narratives. The police department claimed that Mercer had been responding to a report of suspicious behavior and that Maya had resisted lawful orders. They insisted that use of force was necessary and justified. Maya and her supporters rejected this version entirely, highlighting that the video showed no evidence of such suspicion or resistance. To them, the footage was a clear indictment of racial bias and abuse of authority. The video became the catalyst for a national discussion. News outlets dissected the footage frame by frame. Social media users debated the finer points of use of force policies. Legal experts weighed in on potential charges, but more importantly, it gave a face and a voice to a larger issue: police violence disproportionately affecting black women and communities of color. Often overlooked in conversations centered on policing, the assault on Maya sparked a renewed focus on how systemic racism manifests in everyday interactions with law enforcement. As the video went viral, Maya found herself thrust into an uninvited spotlight. Suddenly, her life was no longer private. People who had never met her were demanding answers, showing support or casting judgment. The incident quickly moved beyond the realm of local news. It captured the attention of civil rights groups, advocacy organizations, and political leaders. The video was not just evidence. It was a rallying cry. But for Maya, the footage was just the beginning of a far more difficult story, one involving pain, trauma, and the fight for justice against powerful forces. In the next part, we will explore the immediate aftermath, the public outrage, the media frenzy, and how a community responded to the video that refused to be ignored. The moment the video exploded across social media platforms, the response was swift and overwhelming. People everywhere were shocked, not just by the officer's actions, but by the raw evidence of injustice laid bare for all to see. The clips were shared, reshared, and dissected millions of times. Hashtags demanding justice for Maya Thompson trended nationally, igniting conversations that had been simmering for years. Within hours, local activists and community leaders rallied around Maya. What began as online outrage soon spilled into the streets. Protests erupted in neighborhoods near where the incident occurred. Signs held high bore messages of solidarity and demands for accountability. Justice for Maya. End police violence. Black Lives Matter. The faces in the crowds were diverse, united by a shared frustration and a hunger for change. For many, this was not just about one assault. It was about a pattern of systemic abuse. The video became a symbol of racial profiling and excessive force that black communities, especially black women, had faced for generations. It was a painful confirmation of what many already knew, but had struggled to prove. Media outlets picked up the story quickly, bringing the case into homes far beyond the city's borders. Local news stations ran segments analyzing the video and interviewing witnesses, neighbors, and experts. National networks began to cover the growing protests and the demands for the officer's suspension and investigation. Social media influencers and celebrities lent their voices, amplifying the call for justice. The pressure mounted on the police department to respond. They issued a formal statement acknowledging the video but defended the officer's actions, calling them necessary and within department policy. This response only intensified public anger, with critics accusing the department of protecting its own at the expense of justice. Community leaders were frustrated by the official response and called for independent investigations. Legal organizations offered their support to Maya, vowing to ensure the case would not be swept under the rug. Fundraisers and support networks sprang up to help Maya with legal fees and to provide emotional support. The incident reopened wounds. In a city still grappling with its own troubled history of race relations and policing, residents recounted other instances where unarmed black citizens faced brutal force or were treated unfairly by law enforcement. The video was a stark reminder of the work still left to do. For Maya, the onslaught of attention was both a blessing and a burden. On one hand, she was no longer invisible. Her story was being heard and supported by people across the country. On the other, the sudden fame was invasive and exhausting. Media crews camped outside her home. Strangers sent messages of both support and hate. The personal toll was immense. Friends and family rallied around her, offering shelter and strength. Her mother spoke openly about her fears and hopes, emphasizing the importance of keeping Maya safe and focused on the fight ahead. Her son, young and unaware of the full weight of the situation, was shielded from as much as possible. Amid the chaos, activists organized town hall meetings and community forums. They sought to channel the outrage into meaningful dialogue, focusing not only on this incident, but on broader reforms: body cameras, de-escalation training, civilian oversight, and racial bias education for police. The viral video also sparked conversations among policymakers. City officials faced mounting pressure to address policing practices and improve community relations. Some proposed new legislation aimed at increasing transparency and accountability, yet others resisted, citing concerns about law enforcement effectiveness. As the media frenzy intensified, so did efforts by Officer Mercer's legal team. They began crafting a defense narrative, emphasizing his years of service and disputing the interpretation of the video. The battle for public opinion had begun, with each side trying to control the story. But for many, the video itself was the most powerful testimony. It bypassed words and rhetoric, showing the undeniable reality of an unarmed woman being violently assaulted by the very person sworn to protect her. This immediate aftermath, the fury, the mobilization, the media storm, would set the stage for everything that followed. It was the moment when a simple video became a movement, when a personal tragedy became a public cause. As protests grew and voices multiplied, Maya's case became a symbol of something much larger: the urgent need to rethink how communities and law enforcement interact, and how justice is pursued when the system seems stacked against those it is supposed to serve. In the next part, we will examine the official police response, their statements, investigations, and the internal battles that unfolded behind closed doors. In the hours following the viral spread of the video showing Officer Daniel Mercer's assault on Maya Thompson, the police department was under immense pressure to respond. Calls for accountability were coming from all corners: local leaders, civil rights groups, the media, and an outraged public. The department's handling of this crisis would shape not only the immediate legal outcome, but also the community's trust in law enforcement for years to come. The police chief convened an emergency press conference less than 24 hours after. The video went live. Flanked by department spokespeople and legal advisors, the chief addressed the crowd with a carefully scripted statement. "We are aware of the video circulating on social media," the chief began, his tone measured but firm. "We take all allegations of misconduct seriously and have launched an internal review to thoroughly investigate the incident. Officer Mercer has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of this investigation. Our department is committed to transparency and accountability." While this statement attempted to convey responsibility, many in the community found it insufficient. The language was formal and vague, lacking specific acknowledgement of the assault visible in the footage. The phrase "internal review" raised questions about impartiality, especially among activists wary of police departments investigating their own officers. The department also released a written report describing the events from their perspective. According to this account, Officer Mercer was responding to a call about a suspicious individual matching Maya's description. The report claimed that upon approach, the individual resisted lawful orders and exhibited non-compliant behavior, justifying the use of force. Critics quickly denounced these claims. The video itself showed no signs of resistance. Maya's hands were empty, and her demeanor was calm. The disparity between the official narrative and the visual evidence fueled skepticism and deepened mistrust. The police union also issued a statement defending Officer Mercer. The union emphasized his years of dedicated service and warned against rushing to judgment before all facts were known. They cautioned that officers often face split-second decisions in tense situations and deserved support rather than condemnation. The tension between official defense and public outrage created a volatile atmosphere. While the department sought to protect its own, the community demanded justice for Maya and accountability for Mercer. Behind the scenes, internal affairs began their investigation. Interviews were scheduled with witnesses, officers on scene, and Maya herself. The department collected reports, surveillance footage, and other evidence to build a case that would either justify Mercer's actions or support disciplinary measures. However, internal investigations often face criticism for lack of transparency. Historically, many such probes have resulted in exonerations or minimal consequences, even when public evidence suggests wrongdoing. Community leaders called for an independent investigation by an external agency to ensure fairness and impartiality. Meanwhile, the mayor's office issued a statement urging calm and promising support for a thorough inquiry. But many residents questioned the sincerity of political promises, citing past instances where officials failed to act decisively. The police department also faced pressure to adopt reforms in the wake of the incident. Advocates called for mandatory body cameras, bias training, and revisions to use-of-force policies. Some community organizations organized forums to discuss building better relationships between law enforcement and residents, emphasizing transparency and respect. Social media became a battleground for these debates. Hashtags calling for reform trended alongside demands for firing Mercer and prosecuting him. Conversely, some defended the police, citing concerns about officer safety and the difficulties of the job. As days passed, the department's public relations efforts intensified. They released edited footage from body cameras and dispatch communications, attempting to frame the incident within protocol. Critics argued these edits obscured key moments and questioned why full unedited videos were not released immediately. The Department's response also included attempts to engage with community leaders. Several meetings were held with promises to listen and implement changes. But trust was fragile, and many community members remained skeptical of the department's willingness to enact meaningful reforms. For Maya, the official responses felt like stone walls. The carefully worded statements and internal reviews seemed distant and detached from the reality of her experience. She found herself relying on supporters, legal counsel, and the growing public movement to ensure her voice was heard. Her attorneys began preparing to demand an independent investigation and to challenge the department's narrative. They filed formal complaints and requested access to all evidence related to the incident, including body camera footage, radio transmissions, and officer reports. The battle over truth and accountability was only beginning. In the next part, we will hear from Maya herself, her side of the story, her emotions, and how she found the courage to step forward in the face of overwhelming adversity. In the wake of the viral video, as the city erupted with protests and the police department issued its statements, Maya Thompson found herself thrust into a spotlight she never asked for. For the first time since the incident, she spoke openly about what happened from her perspective, the moments before, during, and after the assault that altered her life. "I was just walking home," Maya began in a quiet but determined interview, her voice steady despite the weight of what she carried. "I wasn't doing anything wrong. I had my hands empty. I wasn't threatening anyone." Her words echoed the calm composure she maintained in the video, but beneath the surface lay a torrent of fear, confusion, and pain. Maya described how she noticed the officer approaching, his tone sharp and aggressive from the start. "I tried to explain, to cooperate, but he grabbed me anyway." The physical assault, she said, was sudden and overwhelming, pushing her against a car, forcing her to the ground without warning or explanation. "I was scared," she admitted. "Not just because of the force, but because I knew it wasn't fair. I wasn't doing anything to deserve that." She recounted the moments after, when onlookers rushed to help, the chaos and the sense of helplessness that settled over her. Beyond the physical pain, Maya spoke about the emotional toll. "It's not just what happened that day. It's the way it's changed how I feel about walking down my own street, about trusting those who are supposed to protect us." She described sleepless nights, anxiety, and the overwhelming pressure of being a symbol for a cause much bigger than herself. Yet, Maya also expressed a fierce determination not to be defined by victimhood. "I want people to see me as more than just a case or a headline. I'm a mother, a worker, a member of this community. I want justice, not just for me, but for everyone who's been treated like this." Her attorneys stood firmly by her side, helping her navigate the legal and media storm. They emphasized Maya's bravery in coming forward and stressed that her story was vital to understanding the truth behind the viral video. Interviews with Maya's family and friends painted a fuller picture of the woman behind the headlines. Her mother described Maya as kind, strong, and resilient, someone who had always stood up for what was right. Friends spoke of her dedication to her son, her hard work, and the quiet courage she displayed every day. At community meetings and rallies, Maya's voice became a beacon. She shared her experiences candidly, connecting with others who had faced similar struggles. Her willingness to speak out inspired many and helped to humanize a story that might otherwise have been reduced to a viral clip. But speaking out was not without its risks. Maya faced backlash, harassment, and threats online. The attention brought unwanted scrutiny to her family and disrupted the normalcy of her life. Through it all, she remained focused on the larger fight. Her story highlighted the realities faced by many unarmed black women who encounter police violence, experiences often overlooked in broader discussions about race and law enforcement. Maya's courage helped bring these stories to the forefront. The public began to see Maya not just as a victim, but as an advocate, a woman channeling her pain into a call for change. Her testimony became a crucial part of the legal proceedings and the community's demand for accountability. In the coming days, Maya prepared to face the courtroom and the world's judgment. Her narrative, supported by the viral video and growing public support, challenged the official accounts and the police department's defense. The journey ahead would be difficult, filled with legal battles, media scrutiny, and personal healing. But Maya's voice, clear, courageous, and unwavering, was a powerful force in the fight for justice. In the next part, we will explore the community's response, the protests, rallies, and grassroots activism that grew from Maya's story, and the viral video that captured a nation's attention. In the days following the release of the viral video and Maya Thompson's brave public statements, the community response was immediate and powerful. What started as a collective shock soon transformed into organized action. The people of Maya's neighborhood and beyond refused to let this moment fade into silence. Within 24 hours of the video going viral, local activists mobilized. Community centers and churches, often the pillars of support in underserved areas, became hubs for meetings and strategy sessions. Volunteers spread the word on social media, organizing peaceful protests to demand justice for Maya and broader reforms in policing. The protests were a tapestry of voices, ages, and backgrounds. Young students, elders, clergy, and professionals marched side by side. Their chants echoed through the streets. No justice, no peace. Accountability now. End police brutality. The movement quickly gained momentum, drawing the attention of local and national media. One of the most striking aspects was the diversity of the crowd. People from different races and socio-economic backgrounds united, recognizing the incident, not as an isolated problem, but a symptom of systemic failures that affected everyone. The protests highlighted the urgent need for change, both in the way law enforcement operated and in how communities were treated. Organizers emphasized peaceful demonstration, seeking to keep the focus on Maya's story and the demand for transparency. They collaborated with legal experts and community leaders to ensure that protests remained constructive, safe, and impactful. City officials found themselves caught between supporting lawful protests and managing public order. While some expressed sympathy for Maya's plight, others were hesitant, wary of unrest. Nevertheless, the sheer volume of public outcry made it impossible to ignore. Several grassroots organizations that had long advocated for police reform seized the opportunity to amplify their messages. They called for specific policy changes, mandatory body cameras, independent oversight commissions, enhanced training on racial bias, and stronger consequences for officers found guilty of misconduct. Town hall meetings and panel discussions were held regularly, where community members could voice their concerns directly to policymakers and law enforcement officials. Maya attended some of these events, sharing her experience and lending a human face to the statistics and policies. Tiki activism extended beyond protests. Fundraisers were organized to support Maya's legal battle and to assist other victims of police violence. Educational workshops helped inform the public about their rights during police encounters, and mentoring programs aimed to empower youth affected by systemic injustice. Social media remained a critical tool. Hashtags like #JusticeForMaya and Protect Our Community trended for weeks, while viral posts and videos educated millions about the nuances of the case and the broader issues at stake. Influencers and celebrities lent their voices, bringing national spotlight and pressure on decision-makers. The movement also sparked creative expressions of resistance and hope. Art installations, murals, and poetry readings commemorated Maya's story and the struggle for justice. These cultural acts not only sustained morale, but helped keep the conversation alive in public spaces. However, the journey was not without challenges. Counter-protests emerged, fueled by those who viewed the police defense narrative as paramount. Some incidents of tension and confrontations occurred, reminding everyone of the deep divisions still present. Still, the community remained steadfast, committed to channeling their frustration into meaningful change. The activism catalyzed by Maya's case became a rallying point for a generation demanding a new vision of justice. The impact reached into schools, workplaces, and faith communities, fostering dialogues about race, privilege, and the role of policing in society. For many, the incident became a call to action, not just for reforming police practices, but for addressing the systemic inequalities underlying them. As the protests continued, lawmakers were compelled to take notice. Committees were formed, bills proposed, and hearings scheduled. The public pressure was reshaping the political landscape, making it clear that the issue could no longer be ignored or minimized. Maya's courage to speak out, combined with the community's passionate response, created a powerful synergy. Together, they transformed a moment of personal trauma into a movement for collective justice. In the next part, we will delve into the legal battle that ensued, the charges brought against Officer Mercer, the courtroom drama, and the fight for accountability. As the community protests gained momentum and the spotlight on Maya Thompson's case intensified, the wheels of the legal system began to turn. The viral video and overwhelming public pressure forced the district attorney's office to act decisively. For many, this was the moment when justice seemed within reach, or at least a chance to hold Officer Daniel Mercer accountable. Within weeks of the incident, the DA announced formal charges against Mercer. The decision to prosecute was hailed by activists and Maya's supporters as a hard-won victory. Mercer was charged with assault and battery, excessive use of force, and civil rights violations. These were serious allegations, carrying the potential for significant legal consequences. The announcement, however, marked the start of a grueling and complex legal battle. Courtrooms rarely offer straightforward paths to justice, especially in cases involving law enforcement officers. The prosecution faced the challenge of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Mercer's actions were unlawful and unjustified. Meanwhile, Mercer's defense team aimed to protect their client's career and reputation, using every legal tool at their disposal. The pretrial phase was a whirlwind of motions, hearings, and media scrutiny. Both sides engaged in intense legal wrangling over evidence, witness testimonies, and procedural matters. Defense attorneys questioned the admissibility of the viral video, claiming it lacked context and was edited in a way that misrepresented the events. They sought to introduce their own body camera footage and dispatch recordings, hoping to shift the narrative. Maya's legal team fought vigorously to ensure that the video remained central to the case. They argued that the unedited footage clearly showed an unprovoked assault on an unarmed woman. They also sought to include testimony from eyewitnesses who had been present at the scene, many of whom were willing to testify about the excessive force and racial profiling they had witnessed. Throughout this phase, the public followed the proceedings closely. Courtroom updates were disseminated through news outlets and social media, fueling ongoing debates about the justice system and police accountability. Maya herself attended hearings regularly, supported by her attorneys and surrounded by community advocates. The courtroom drama intensified when key witnesses took the stand. Several community members recounted the incident in detail, reinforcing Maya's account and highlighting Officer Mercer's aggressive behavior. Expert witnesses testified about the department's use of force policies and how Mercer's actions deviated from accepted standards. In contrast, Mercer's defense presented a different picture. They portrayed him as a dedicated officer responding to a legitimate threat, arguing that his use of force was necessary and proportional. They questioned Maya's credibility, suggesting that her account was influenced by emotions and public pressure. The defense also sought to undermine the prosecution's narrative by citing Mercer's prior service record and his compliance with department protocols. The judge, presiding over the case, faced immense challenges balancing legal procedures with the intense public interest. Courtroom security was heightened during proceedings to manage crowds and prevent disruptions. The judge emphasized the importance of an impartial trial, warning against media sensationalism influencing the jury. The trial itself was a marathon. Days stretched into weeks, with each side meticulously presenting their case. The tension inside the courtroom was palpable as jurors absorbed graphic testimony, conflicting narratives, and a flood of evidence. Outside the courtroom, supporters of Maya and Mercer held vigils and rallies, each side advocating fervently for their interpretation of justice. The city was divided, with passionate arguments unfolding in public forums, on social media, and in private conversations. Amid the legal battles, Maya remained focused on the larger goal: justice not only for herself, but for all those who suffered from systemic abuses. Her attorneys worked tirelessly, coordinating with civil rights groups and legal experts to build the strongest possible case. The stakes could not have been higher. A conviction would signal a shift toward greater accountability and reform in policing practices. And acquittal, on the other hand, risked deepening community mistrust and perpetuating the cycle of violence. The courtroom drama captured the nation's attention, becoming a focal point in the broader movement for racial justice and police reform. Media outlets covered each development extensively, sparking discussions among policymakers, activists, and ordinary citizens alike. As the trial progressed, it became clear that this case was about more than one officer or one victim. It was a test of a justice system grappling with its own biases, a society confronting uncomfortable truths, and a community demanding change. In the next part, we will explore the personal toll the trial took on Maya, her family, and the community, the emotional highs and lows, the resilience required, and the human story behind the headlines.